Hello and welcome to Mirror Realm. My name's Nick. I go by Wyvern on the Discord servers. In this video, Jarrod and myself, we do some detailed commentary and some analysis on the Season 7 Online League Final that I recently played in. The video, it's from my perspective, and we just give some insight into all of the decision making on my side from the entire game. And we look into a couple of things that I perhaps could have done better. And we also look at some things that my opponent could have done differently that very likely would have meant that they would have won instead of myself. For context, we've intentionally tried to keep the scope of the discussion isolated to the match itself. Sorcery, it's an incredibly deep game, and nearly everything is situationally dependent. It's a huge part. It's perhaps even the most important part of why Sorcery is such an awesome game. So just please do keep that in mind, that when we're talking about what we think is the correct thing to do or what is the wrong thing to do, it's within the context of the specific situation that we're talking about in this specific game, and not necessarily, sometimes it is a broad sweeping rule that applies, and we try to point that out when that's the case. So please keep that in mind. So without further ado, let's jump in. It's over 3 hours of discussion between Jarrod and myself, and it's completely raw and unedited discussion. I hope you enjoy. We're about to roll the dice. My opponent wins a dice roll, and he chooses to go first. Now, if I had won the dice roll, I would have chosen to go second and let my opponent go first. And the reasons for that, I'm just going to pause here so we can talk about the reasons, because it impacts the mulligans, and we'll talk about this before we see the mulligans, and then we can see what happens with the mulligans after. But the reasons are just because the site placements in this matchup are super important, ridiculously important, and the Archimago player has the possibility of being able to set up a defensive perimeter that the Druid player, they just can't attack, potentially all the way through until after turn sort of 7-8 type of timing. And if that happens in this matchup, the Archimago player is in really strong position, definitely a favourite to win if that happens. And if you don't get any good frontline side and the Druid player can start potentially attacking you with 4-powered things from sort of turn 3, you're in big trouble pretty much. So, having that happen is really important, and being able to be on the draw with the mulligan rule in this, to be able to draw 3 sites, mulligan all 3, draw 3 more to replace them, have the scry rule to look at the top site, put that on the bottom if needed. That's 7 sites at that point, and then draw a site at the beginning of your first turn and draw a site at the beginning of your second turn if needed to find that good site to put in on the front line. You get to go through 9 sites, and with our deck list, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to get at least one good frontline site if you go through 9. So that's part of the reason. Another part is you just want to be reactive anyway. So you generally in this matchup as the Archimago player, responding to what they're doing and sort of reading the game, taking what they give you, and you just get extra information for all of your turns if you're on the draw. And just the other reason is just related to the nature of the Druid player, that they have a lot of threshold requirements with, if they're water fire, they can sort of get into threshold issues, and they're more likely to get into those issues if they're on the play, just because they don't get to scry and because they don't get to draw a card at the beginning of their first turn. So I think that's most. And then there is a tempo advantage that is obviously significant, but as soon as you miss any plays because of thresholds, that's immediately lost. So there's a bit more to it, and you can probably add some more to that, but it's almost always the case that you want to, if you're not sure, you choose to go first. And if, fair enough if that's what my opponent did. It's not like it's a mistake as such, but having a clear understanding of this matchup, it's definitely, in this particular matchup, you go second. Nearly all the time you want to go first, though. So if you got...
Yeah, I think you covered pretty much most of it. The only thing that sort of leans towards... It's mostly just the Druid going first. It's not even so much the Archmago going first. It's more that the Druid can have some extremely powerful draws if you hit like the god draw with like through ponds and war horses and cats and things like that, that you can get like incredible pressure out early. But anytime that doesn't happen, which isn't like super common either, but anytime that doesn't happen, I think you're better off being on the draw for all the reasons you stated. There's also the possibility of like the druid doing that and the archmage just not having like, you know, the spider on the bedrock, or if they have the spider on like the wrong site in particular, then all of a sudden you lose to a geyser and you're feeling pretty bad, and you're feeling pretty bad and pretty silly about choosing to go second. But I think
there's definitely the prospect you just get overrun.
Yeah,
for sure.
But it's a much higher percentage play to be on the draw, I think.
Yep, and I was sort of thankful in a way when my opponent won the dice roll, because I was like, because I was pretty sure he would choose to go first, so it was like, oh, now I don't have to choose to go second, because I would sort of, it wouldn't look too good if I choose to go second, and then he has that start that you just described, and I lose the game in 5 turns. Everyone would just think that, because obviously that can happen. It just doesn't happen very often, right? If you're talking about you're making these decisions on the basis of what gives you the best chance to win, right? So,
nothing's guaranteed. It's always just about the percentage points either way, and it's not. I think like in this matchup, I think it is actually a significant increase to your win percentage to go second, but it's not like out of the world that you would still be that you still find being on the play. It's just feels a little bit better to be on the draw.
So let's have a look at the mulligans, and then we can start to sort of illustrate. At least we know what cards I drew. We don't know for sure what cards my opponent drew. We have a bit of an idea.
Through watching Ira's video, we have a little bit of information about
the 3 sites we know for a fact, because he plays all 3 before he draws one. Yeah, he doesn't mulligan any of them. So we know what the 3 sites were.
Which is pond, desert, and river. Not a river, floodplain. Yeah.
So we can talk. Let's talk about now we're there. Let's just talk about the opponent's mulligans here on the play. So I believe he mulligans 1 spell. He probably should mulligan 2 sites, right?
Yeah, I think
for sure. He should be mulliganing the.
Yeah. I think you keep the floodplain and then you mulligan the other 2 sites. It changes if you need to change some of your spells, but I think it's very rare you don't want to try and mulligan 3 cards if you can. And in the case of his sites in particular, like the desert is effectively just a fire threshold. It's like a dead card in this matchup, so you sort of want to get rid of it because realistically you're expecting to get your fire thresholds anyway if you're mulliganing, especially if you mulligan 2 sites, if you mulligan the pond as well. And since he didn't have a beast to follow up with the pond, it's not even a bad site to mulligan straight away anyway, especially if you're getting 2 sites further down to try and get towards your funeral pyres and just the sites in general that are good in this matchup.
Yeah, and there are a lot, right? Funeral pyres are pretty significant. Smokestacks is really significant, like is huge, basically. Possibly
Smokestack probably the best
my
side
opponent
in the
wins. This potentially my opponent just wins if he has a smokestacks early on.
I suppose it's worth considering what happens if he mulligans those 2 and things go wrong. So potentially,
Well, he has a floodplain, so he already has double water threshold.
The only way it can go wrong is if you mulligan those 2 and you draw into 2 more water, and then like you draw sites for your first couple of turns, and they're water also. And in that scenario, you probably would have lost the game anyway, even if you did keep the 1 desert, because most of the stuff, you need more than 1 fire threshold to make this deck work anyway. So that's probably irrelevant because you lose that game anyway. What other ways?
There's a reason. Again, ties back to why, like, you're in a stronger position to more aggressively mulligan those sites with confidence if you're on the draw, right? Because you get to scry the site to make sure that you're right. So it's like in a way it's kind of safe as such that my opponent kept those sites because of the threshold. I'm pretty sure the reason, by the way, is because I think he's got Ruler of Thul in that opening hand, and I think he wants the floodplain to be the frontline site, and I think he wants a water site as his starting site, and I think he wants a fire threshold. So I think that's why he did it.
I think it probably is why he did it, but I also think that line of thinking is actually incorrect. I think you actually don't even mind in because you've got Ruler of Thor, right? You don't mind that much if the floodplain is your backline site in a pinch, because you hit no other, because you the two sites in Mulligan weren't water. You can still play the floodplain at the back, still be able to get your double water threshold, and still have the water site at the back, because you're trying to set up so you don't mind that much if there was going to be a root spider in the front anyway, because you don't need to kill it with the floodplain because you're setting up for a Ruler of Thor play anyway. And you're never going to be able to flood the black back site anyway, so that's doesn't matter either way. So
yeah, and just
keeping that, for that.
Even if
reason.
you don't get the smokestacks, even if you don't get a funeral, the thing with the funeral piles in particular, you probably almost certainly there's 3 in the deck, right? So you just want to dig further down the deck so that when you get to the 8th side or whatever it is, there's just you hit funeral piles at some point during the game. So you just want to dig, and the smokestacks could be pretty good at any time before all of the front site placements are taken, which was pretty late on in this game. It was like after turn 10, I believe. So, yeah. So I think it's just the funeral piles could be huge. Smokestacks could have been game-winning, and potentially so could a River of Flame as well, if you had an Infiltrate to go with it. Could have been game-ending in this as well. So there were some really significant sites to dig for, basically. So I know that because Ira mentioned that he mulligans are red cap Poweries, and I think Ira was quite surprised in his commentary that he mulliganed it, but it's a pretty trash card in this matchup, and I'm pretty sure that was the right choice for sure to mulligan that.
It basically doesn't become a good card until like turn 7 or turn 8 when you can finally get around their frontline sites.
Yeah, and that's just because it basically just dies to everything. Like, it dies to Pebble Paths. Like, it's useless at the Pebble Paths. It's useless if they have Perilous Bridge. It's useless if they have Gnome Hollows. It's useless if they have a Root Spider. It dies if they have a Quagmire. It dies to Lightning Bolts. It dies to Magic Missiles. Like, it's really bad in this matchup.
On top of the fact that he didn't have 2 fire thresholds, so that's probably why he was thinking about mulliganing it originally. Maybe he thought about all those other reasons that we mentioned as well. But even without those, you still consider mulliganing the Poweries anyway, just because there's no double fire threshold, and you're potentially looking for a cat or another beast to power out with the pond anyway.
Yeah. Yep. So, I think there's no criticism there, basically, to mulligan that Poweries. It was not only no criticism, but it was 100% the right decision, pretty much.
Yeah,
to mulligan it.
So, interestingly enough, on the Poweries topic, there's been a few times in all of our testing where I even tried taking Poweries out of red decks because they were so bad in this matchup in particular. But they're pretty good in other matchups, so they ended up coming back in most of the time. But yeah, that's the little fun fact.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, they get they're conceptually different, right? Because the Ruler of Thor and Jihad and stuff, they potentially just end up stuck in your hand until like turn 12, and then they pop out like 2 of them on the same turn and win the game, type of thing.
Yeah, and at that point they're great. Like in the mid to late game, they're very good, but in the early to early mid, they can be very hard to get down on board. So you're generally just better off having a different card.
And I don't know if we know anything. We know that my opponent had Ruler of Thor. I think nothing else makes sense with these mulligans and stuff if he didn't. So. And I know
there's a good chance he might have had the Atlantean Fate at this point, in his opening hand, because his start was pretty slow and clunky. So there's a good chance he just kept key cards for the matchup in general. Maybe it was the Geyser instead of the Atlantean Fate, because I know through Ira's commentary he had all 3 of those fairly early, because Ira was mentioning them. Sure. So potentially they were in his starting hand.
Yeah, and I think the Geyser, I don't know,
and they're all cards you don't want to mulligan.
No, the Geyser maybe if you don't have any other. I don't know. But it's certainly not the Ruler and certainly not the Atlantean Fate. You just got to keep them. They're too critical, right? They're too critical in this matchup. You can't mulligan either of those.
Yeah, so, they're 2 of the cards that we generally crows for.
Yeah. So if that's the case, that this is a starting hand, right? Ruler of Thor, Atlantean Fate, Red Cap Poweries. I think what you want to do, if this is the hand, you mulligan the Poweries in the desert and the pond. I'm pretty sure that's what. So as we're saying, I think it's just you hit the smokestacks, you win. pretty much. So it's worth going. It's worth just digging for it. And funeral pyres are really important, pretty much. So I think that's enough there. Again, we don't know for sure. That's the thing. We don't know what the other spell was, so makes it a bit tricky.
Realistically, it was probably Ruler and either Fate or Geyser and the Prowries, and then the Prowries mulliganed into the other one. That's what it sounds roughly like. What probably happened.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, obviously, opponent didn't know our specific deck list, but even against the standard Archimago deck list, you still want the funeral pyres, you still want the smokestacks, right? Like, you still want
and also against those ones, you still want the Geyser, you still want the Fates.
Yeah.
It's just our deck in particular is running Bedrock, which not many do, and that's like those two cards are the biggest reason for it. So.
I think we can talk about my mulligans. Is that fair now? Yeah. I can quickly say what I thought, and then you can chime in with extras. Does that make sense? Because obviously, in the end, I can say what I thought and what I did. Obviously, because it's very fresh in the mind because it was just from the other day. So, sorry, last weekend. So it's pretty fresh in the mind. So, I'm looking at my hand. I'm thinking, sort of looking at this through the context of whenever you mulligan stuff, you want to definitely conceptualize things in worst case scenario. Like, if I mulligan these things and draw horrible replacements, what does it look like? So I'm looking at my hand thinking Perilous Bridge as the frontline site, the one in front of, like, we call it the frontline site, but the one that's not your starting site, but the one that's in front of that. If that's Perilous Bridge, I'm happy with that. As a worst case scenario, I'm happy with that, basically. I'm okay if the Mirror Realm ends up adjoining that Perilous Bridge, whichever direction the Druid goes with his last placements, if I just follow. So I'm thinking that's pretty good as a worst case scenario. I'm thinking you just got to keep Root Spider in this matchup, pretty much. It's just a keeper. And then I'm thinking it's not a great set of 3 cards. I don't have any sort of proactive plays. I can play the Root Spider proactively as such, but I wasn't happy to keep both the Earthquake and the Lightning Bolt. To some degree, they have like anti-synergy as such. Like, if I Lightning Bolt something, then there's way less prospect to get a 2 or a 3 for 1 with the Earthquake. So I'm thinking I'm mulliganing one of those. I end up choosing the Lightning Bolt just because I have a good frontline sight and I have a Root Spider. I'm sort of feeling like I'm not going to get overrun too quickly with as it is. So I end up deciding to mulligan the Lightning Bolt, and then also I don't have a good starting site. I definitely don't want the Mirror Realm to be the starting site. That's like the worst possible starting site, and I don't want it to be Perilous Bridge. So as things stand, my starting site is the Pebble Paths, and it's a horrible starting site because, one, it doesn't do anything, basically. And 2, Atlantean Fate, pretty much. We really want either Bedrocks or Ordinary sites to form up some of the composition of the sites that we end up playing, just so we don't get completely destroyed by Atlantean Fate. So I know Ira was surprised when I mulliganed the Pebble Path, but the reality is, looking at my hand, I would rather a Bedrock. There's 3 of those. I would rather any ordinary site. So Towers, I'd rather a Lookout. I would rather a Gnome Hollows. Would rather the other Perilous Bridge.
Windmill.
I would rather Windmills. Yep.
Rather Witness Den.
I would rather, yeah, exactly. So actually, it's like, and if I get another Pebble Pass to replace it, then it's exactly the same, so it's of no consequence.
Effectively, Pebbled Path and Quagmire are the only 2 sites you wouldn't as bad as Paths being in the first site. They're the only ones that are. Everything else is better.
Maybe not. I mean, you're probably like or similarly bad. Like, it probably is worse if I end up getting Merlin's Tower, and it's probably worse if I end up getting Pillar, probably. But just Merlin's Tower on the basis that it's another air threshold. And it's so it technically it could be a bit worse. But this is the thing. If I'm on the play in particular here, right, I got to keep it.
You're forced to keep it.
I got to keep it, and I got to play it as a starting site. That's it. But because I'm on the draw, I get to mulligan it and have the prospect of something better happening, and I end up with a bedrock basically, and it's way better, pretty much. It's game winningly better, right? Whereas, if I'm on the play, well, actually, if I'm on the play, I think there's a good chance that, well, one, I can't mulligan anything here, and arguably I've even got to keep the lightning bolt at that point, because at least I know I can make that play, right? Like, I can cast it.
Yeah, I think if you're on the play, there's an argument for mulliganing the Earthquake.
Yeah,
just so you try and be a bit more proactive. Potentially mulligan the lightning bolt, but it's pretty iffy.
And then I think the other big decision is it just turn one, tap, draw a sign if you're on the play and you don't even play anything? I think so.
Yeah, potentially.
I think that's what happens, right? So
you would have held it down if you did that.
Ironically, exactly right. So basically, then you're saying that your opponent basically gets to go first and draw on their turn and get the scry, basically, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably what happens. So just to put into perspective, like how this decision to go first or second here, I think
if you're on the play, instead of tap drawing, you would just have to mulligan the Paths and the Mirror Realm, I think. Potentially. Wait, is that true? I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah,
it wouldn't feel. Both options feel bad. Let me put it that way.
They feel super bad, and if you're on the draw, it's super good and super easy.
Yeah,
this mulligan. So I'll just move on now. Is there more to add on the mulligan, or?
Yeah. So what you ended up mulliganing was the Paths and the bolt, correct?
Yeah, correct.
So I was because I couldn't see your hand when I was watching the Ira video, and this is the first I'm seeing of your hand now. I was surprised when you mulliganed the Pebbled Paths originally, as well, just like Ira. But seeing this hand, I completely agree, and like not surprised at all. I think the bigger thing to consider on the mulligan is the Bolt versus Earthquake discussion, and the possibility of just sending both back.
Yeah.
Think because you're expecting water. You potentially want to mulligan the Earthquake. I can see the reasoning for keeping it being if your spider dies through Geyser, Fate, etc. It's like the reset after taking 10, 12 damage sort of thing, when everything's on your side and you just clear the board and get back into it that way. And I'm assuming that's why you ended up keeping.
Yeah, definitely. Or an early Ruler of Thule, for example. Ruler of Thule play could just be game ending, basically. Because I have these good frontline science, right? So, if, like you're saying, if he kills the spider, the Geyser or whatever, and then Ruler of Thule, which he had, there's a good chance he actually had all of the cards we're describing, by the way, in his opening hand. Potentially, that's just game over at that point, if I can't kill the Ruler and the other thing that came across. All at the same time.
So that is, and then the interesting thing about keeping the Bolt is that if he has like a triple fire start and just has like pressure into Morgana or something, you can potentially either bolt like a Warhorse that he played on 2, or a Dragonette that was played on 3, or go for 50-50 on the Morgana, because you would assume the Morgana would be played on the Druid itself. I think
the Tawny, if they, I would hope. I would hope that they would make it so that it was both the Tawny and the Druid.
Yeah. The thing that I'm working through the options and trying to get towards is...
Well, Bolt, as soon as Tawny's involved, Bolt is immediately worse if they're playing around it, right? Just way worse.
I agree. That's why I'm sort of like leaning towards, I agree with the mulliganing the Bolt over the Earthquake. The one thing I'm working towards is I think there's a possibility you mulligan the Bolt and the Earthquake, just to try and get more action. I think if you had the Bedrock in your hand, and if you knew they had the Bedrock, you definitely mulligan the Bolt and the Earthquake, because you know you're going to be fairly safe with this hand. But because you don't have that, I sort of understand the decision making of keeping one of the defensive cards. But I do think trying to decide whether or not I would have mulliganed both or kept the Earthquake like you did. I think I probably would have sent both back just because Earthquake is a little awkward in this matchup. There's another reason to consider keeping it in that you might they might have like a color out of place or a tri-site start, and then you could potentially just win the game that way. Or they have a smokestack so you can move away, which is another good reason to keep the Earthquake. So I think overall, I think your mulligan was like pretty much spot on. The only discussion would be whether or not to keep or send the Earthquake, and I think both options are fine, and I'm not sure which one is actually like 100% correct. I think both are good.
Yeah. Well, we also have to bear in mind that I don't. Oh, we just yeah. There's only so long I can make to make the decision as well, right? Like in the end, you just gotta go with something. So, but yeah, I was pretty obviously, like you said though. If I knew the Bedrock was coming, I'll mulligan it, but I didn't.
Yeah, for sure, exactly. Which with the knowledge you have, I think it's good. One thing that frustrates me to no end. That with TTS in particular that you're about to find out when you put the card down to mulligan is it shows the thresholds of the sites when they're face down, so he knows you're mulliganing an earth threshold, which is something I really hope they fix in the future at some point.
Yeah,
you can get around it by mulliganing, like by putting your card off the board and mulliganing the other way.
I'll remember that in the future.
Yeah,
that's not great.
I think most people probably wouldn't even pick up on it. And it's not like it's perfect information, but it is still information for free.
Yeah, but they shouldn't obviously have.
Exactly. And so I'm assuming there was issues with the
you
TTS.
couldn't slide them under because I think they Drew was hosting it and had some older version of the of tabletop of the whatever it is there.
Interestingly, in the finals that I played for the league before, we also couldn't do that because they were testing a new TTS itself.
So it's a new thing that they're testing.
I think it's a new because in the video you would notice for my finals it was a different background as well. It was like a new. I was surprised they weren't using it for this, but maybe it's just not ready. And I think there's probably some combination of both things that's going on there, so I'm not sure exactly, but it's probably something like that where he's working on the new version and it's a few little issues still.
So I get to scry now. So I've just drawn the Divine Healing and a Bedrock. So I chose to scry the sites just because all of what we were just saying about how important the sites are, basically. And two, I've drawn Divine Healing, so it's pretty important for me to just bear in mind that I want to get to the triple Earth threshold at some point. And then also, like with this current hand, like I'm not starting with the Mirror Realm or the Perilous Bridge at the moment. The Bedrock is my starting site, and I have that Root Spider, so I'm happy at this point to hit another good site for sure, pretty much. As things stand, it's like Bedrock starting site, and then Perilous Bridge in front of it, or Mirror Realm, the Bedrock in front of it. That basically there's a Mirror Realm and a Perilous Bridge on the front line, and a Bedrock in the back, and the Mirror Realm's either going to copy the Perilous Bridge or the Bedrock.
It's also it's just more value scrying the Atlas deck because it's smaller for starters, but you never shuffle it. Whereas you get the information of, all right, that's one site I'm never going to see again, or it's like one site closer to whatever particular site you're trying to get to. Whereas if you do it to your spellbook, at some point you're going to play a Common Sense and then shuffle, and then all of a sudden that scry value is just gone.
Yep. Yeah, sure. Yep. I mean, typically, that's part of we normally we are scrying. Obviously, sometimes you are going to scry for the spell, but normally, like way over half the time, we are doing sites for the reasons that you just said, right? Ignoring all the other factors. But in particular here, I'm just thinking, Like, I'm totally happy to get another good site at this point, pretty much. So I send Quagmire to the bottom. I don't. It's sort of a good site in this matchup. Like, once they're sort of connected and they can start attacking you. Once you sort of got 5 frontline sites, or the jihads come down, or whatever it is. Mid-game. Yeah, but you don't want it. It's horrible now. It's basically just a vanilla site as such. Yeah, potentially even worse, right? Because it's stopping you from potentially moving yourself as well. But yeah. But definitely it was an easy decision to send that one to the bottom for me. Possibly the easiest possible decision of all the sites. Actually, it might be the worst.
This game as well.
What's that one? Sorry.
Probably the easiest decision that's been made this game.
Probably, yeah. I honestly think it's the worst possible site to have got now. I'm looking at the site list. I think literally I would rather any of the other sites than that one at this juncture.
Yes, I think that's true. I suppose the one other question would be Merlin's Tower this early. Maybe, because that would also be bottomed. I'm pretty certain.
It would be bottomed, yep. I would have bottomed it for sure, but it's just, it's...
Yeah.
Maybe at his worst, I'm not sure.
But... Yeah, I think they're the only two. They're the bottom two for sure. Because if it was like, say, a Pebbled Pass, you'd be happy to keep it. If it was, because one's on the bottom. If it was a Pillar, you'd probably still keep it. Maybe it'd be, maybe you wouldn't because you have the Divine Healing. It's interesting, that one, but it's they're probably the bottom few options would be my guess.
Sure. So I just straight away, I think you can tell it straight away now. I'm like, this is a weird start. He's played Pond with nothing and didn't mulligan any sites. To me, like, immediately I'm like, he's got Ruler of Thor, basically, and because of that, I'm like, my starting site's just going to be Bedrock, basically. So one other read you can have off of this start is potentially he's got a non-floodplain water site and wants to play Adept Illusionist on 2. Yeah.
But they're probably the two main reads. Because if he had Cat, he wouldn't have played the Pond there unless he has 2 ponds.
Yeah, sure.
And that's also another possibility, but I think they're probably most of the possibilities.
So I've just read it as Ruler of Thor, pretty much. I mean, yeah, it could be...
Which is the safest option. And you know the answer to all of those questions as soon as he's played his next site also, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, but now, because I've got, it's my turn, I got to make a decision. Am I drawing a site or am I drawing a spell? And I basically made the decision as soon as he's done that. Bedrock is my starting site, basically. Like, right, I've just made the decision. So, and on that basis, I'm drawing a spell because I have no turn 2 play. So I want a Common Sense, I want a Blink,
or you're going to try and draw Philo,
Ring of Morrigan, like, but there's all sorts of stuff I want to sort of... Yeah, there's all sorts of core, yeah. Princess as well would be very sort of like, obviously you can't play it on 2, but it could dictate your early turns if you draw a princess.
Yeah, because then you would know that you need to play the bridge in front of you and then mirror realm the bridge instead of mirror realming the bedrock, and then your Divine Healing's further away, but you've got Princess online, which means you probably went and got Ring, or potentially Fellow, but most likely Ring because of this match. It's just absolutely incredible and absolute game winning. And then,
it's possible they just play a Warhorse or something on turn 2, obviously, and you might end up drawing a Magic Missiles or something here as well. Like, there's a lot of things it's not, there's a reasonable percentage chance that I'm going to draw a card now that either is useful this turn or next turn, basically, right? So that's why I'm drawing a card, a spell.
We should probably discuss so if you drew a site instead.
Yeah.
The reason for that is just to have more options as to what you're starting, like just knowing what your overall game plan is for the first 4 turns of what your sites are going to be in particular. But the benefit of being able to draw like the stone or the core this turn is sort of just what outweighs it.
And just the fortune of me having the sites that I do, right? Like, because I have a Bedrock and a Perilous Bridge and a Mirror Realm that can copy either of those two. Like
that whole thing is predicated on those sites in particular.
Almost always we are drawing a site on our first turn. like a massively high percentage of the time, right? I'm just very fortunate to have ended up with a very flexible set of 3 sites, like very good starting location with bedrock, and what is going to be 2 very good frontline sites, basically.
Yeah. For sure.
So I've drawn an Angel's Egg, and I've got a Divine Healing, so obviously I've got an Earthquake and a Root Spider. I'm looking at what I've got now, and I'm thinking I'm in very good spot to through the lens of playing things safe, right? I don't need to take unnecessary risks.
You've got no action realistically, but
it's all reaction, and
you're buying time. Like the time you're buying with your healing effectively, and the lockdown is just drawing cards over turns, as opposed to trying to have action cards to draw cards.
Yeah, and it's very important that I don't basically. Well, it's always important you don't make a mistake, but with this particular hand, right, it's very important that I don't give my opponent anything. So I end up playing that bedrock passing turn.
Interestingly, when I was watching the video from Ira, I saw you play the bedrock, and I was like, oh, that's unfortunate that it has to be a bedrock as your starting site. But it's still a good starting site, so that's fine. It's our flex site for being a back row or a frontline site. And then when I saw you follow up with a Mirror Realm, I was like, oh, that feels it feels amazing, that start.
Yeah.
Like, you're not punished for having to play the bedrock in the back, on top of just the bedrocks being so good. And then, of course, later during the game, you draw another Root Spider, and it's feels even better that you have 2 bedrocks in play.
Yep. Yeah, it was very good, and very good against Elanian Fate, obviously, just generally not only do the Root Spiders live, but they can't shut off your Earth thresholds. So I'm about to draw. So my thinking here is that I end up I basically know that I'm playing Mirror Realm to copy Bedrock, basically. And the only possible site that I could draw that would make that not true is if I draw a Bedrock. Yeah. Which is incredibly low percentage chance.
So you put 2 on the bottom that weren't, and you have, so it's 2 in 25?
Yeah. So, but conversely, the amount of, if I'm going to play the Bedrock now, the amount of spells that I could draw that would, like, I can't, as a turn 2 play, there is no magic missiles to kill that warhorse that doesn't exist, right? There is no power fly or blink. I can't cast them. Yeah, it's just common sense. Yeah. Or one of the artifacts, right? So there's way less cards that I could potentially draw that I could play on 2. And as far as a turn 3 is concerned, I know that I'm probably just playing the Root Spider, basically. So, so I'm pretty sure on that basis I end up drawing a side, right? Because it doesn't matter. I'm almost.
I probably would have drawn a spell here to try and draw for a common sense, just to try and get some action happening, or one of the artifacts. So it's a 2 in 25 to be Bedrock, like we said, or it's 6 out of.
But I'm not. I'm just drawing because of the future site placements as well. So part of that, for example,
that can also be on the next turn. So that's the only, here or there sort of thing. Because you already have your frontline site, so you're not desperately trying to draw for a frontline site. So I think you're better off trying, because you're also.
Well, it depends what side I draw here, as to what I am or aren't desperate for. So you can
but it's not going to change your turn 3 site almost certainly, and it's
smokestacks would change things quite a bit. I mean, there are plays.
Smokestacks wouldn't even change it, right? Because then you'd just play the bridge in the backline to the other side. Like, so if they played the smokestacks on, say, 7, you would play the bridge on 17, and let them have that front spot, so they're only turning off their own sites, and then you just play all your own sites on the opposite side, so on 19, 20, and 14, 15, and then they're not even on the smokestacks. So I don't even think Smokestack changes how you would play out those early sites. So I think it is better to draw for the common sense there. Mostly just because you have not a lot going on realistically, outside of just getting your spider down and your egg down, things like that.
I'm just seeing. I can't see what happens here. So. Lost the train of thought. Yeah, so I'm playing Spider this turn, no matter what.
Yeah. So did you draw a spell this turn? You did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, those two should have been flipped around realistically, in case it was a common sense. Whereas the site wouldn't have changed what site you were playing this turn.
Unless it was a bedrock. You mean last turn?
Yeah.
You mean last turn, right?
Yeah, last. Yeah. Yeah, so it was the...
So last turn it would have changed...
6 in 46.
6 in 46? What's the 6 in 46?
All common sense, core stone are the cards that you would have played last turn. Because if you drew the ring, you wouldn't have played the ring.
Yeah. Versus a 2 in
25.
So
it's slightly better.
2 in 25.
Yeah, because you know what 2 of the bottoms are.
Know what the 2 on the bottom are. It's 4, 3. And 2 in 25. So it's what 1 in 12. So it's like an 8% chance versus what?
6 in 46.
Yeah, this is whatever that is. 13%.
Higher than 8.
Yeah. There you go. Deserve to lose. Massive misplay.
Misplayed.
Massive misplay, basically.
I mean, we say it jokingly, but like the way we
there are games that you would it's semi-joking, semi-serious. I think as far as I'm less. I mean, obviously you care if you want to lose, but I'm generally more concerned with just making playing the best you can. So I'm just going to interrupt our own discussion for a second here, and I'm splicing this in the next day because I had thought about this a bit more, and I'm consider a lot more things, and I think it's way more close, this decision. I don't think it's the case that it's definitely correct that it was a turn 2 spell, turn 3 site ordering like we had just concluded in our chat just now. And I thought this would just be a really good exercise to, when we talk about, we do these deep dives and we go into stuff a lot, what one of those looks like a little bit. And so Jarrod and I just had another quick chat, and I've just worked out a summary of all of it, and I thought it would be a nice little exercise that we could do here. So just go through pretty quickly a list of all what we think are the sort of pros and cons and why you might go each way, and it'll come clear why it's a super close decision. And then you can leave any comments if there's any other considerations to this that you might think of that we haven't thought of, and also just which way you would go about it and why. That would be pretty cool as a little exercise, we think. So I think a big thing here is that in the actual game itself, I only really one thing an obvious consideration here is that I don't get to think about this for half an hour and talk to Jarrod and have a big conversation about it. I get a few seconds and have to make a decision, basically. So within the limited window I had, I only counted the common senses as something that would meaningfully change things, and I only counted the bedrocks from the spell book. So and then I loosely worked out that there were very similar percent chance. One's 8% and the common sense is 8.7%, and I just decided that if I got the bedrock, it would be considerably more impactful than getting the common sense, and that's why I went that way as a sort of off the cuff, let's say, decision making process. But if we look into it more, and we just look specifically with why the bedrock is a little bit more impactful. So one, it's just really good in this matchup, and that should be obvious as watched through the rest of this video. It's extremely impactful in this matchup, and I knew it full well. So you're happy to draw another bedrock, and then you have the one because it's really impactful, and then two because you don't have to play the mirror realm to copy it, and you have the option what to do with the mirror realm and the flexibility. So you could copy the perilous bridge, you could copy and get another bedrock, a third bedrock, or obviously you could end up copying some other site further down the track potentially. And having that flexibility, I think, is pretty valuable as well. In particular, there is a consideration here that my opponent didn't mulligan any sites, and it's almost guaranteed that that remaining site is a fire site, because it really would not make any sense if it wasn't. It's possible that this is some weird mono water druid deck. It's possible it's water splashed with something else, but as far as the meta is concerned, there's not really anything much. It's all, if it's water, it's fire water pretty much. It's just the strongest archetype by miles, and I'm playing in the final here, so it's a pretty reasonable assumption to make that there's a good possibility that that remaining site in my opponent's hand is a fire site, and it's one that they chose to not mulligan, which also means that there's a better than average chance that it's one of the better fire sites. So them being like smokestacks and funeral pyres probably. So in the case that it's a smokestacks, having the third bedrock to put in front of the smokestacks will be really good, really, really good, because then I could basically have a root spider on that bedrock and force them to have to effectively wrap all the way around it if they wanted to attack that way, which obviously they wouldn't. It would take many turns to wrap around it all the way. So, and then I would have the perilous bridge to front line in whatever the side is that the smokestacks wasn't on. So it will be a really good setup versus smokestacks that if I otherwise, the otherwise smokestacks would be a real problem, basically. Now, I did have the earthquake, which is a consideration as well. So even if it was a real problem, I could deal with it via an earthquake to move their smokestacks backwards. So that's also, a consideration there as well. So even though I'm describing that smokestacks is a real problem and so on, I did have an alternate solution. So, but on the whole, bedrock's just super impactful in this matchup, and having an extra bedrock, you be really happy with that, and it's really impactful. On the other side of this, I think this is where we both agreed in principle, I think, Jarrod and myself, on why you would want a bedrock. I think the bit where he was thinking a little bit differently to what I was thinking, and why we ended up having a conversation the following day that I'm talking about now, is because we tried to reconcile all of those thoughts together that I had at the moment, that Jarrod was thinking, and then we did a bit of a deep dive to sort of try and bring it all together, and let's go for it. So I think the common sense of split out the chance separately for the drawing the stone of the core and drawing one of the common senses. So if you add them together, it's about 13% that you would get one of those, but depending on which one it is, it's sort of a different outcome. So in the case that it's a common sense, that's the primary thing you would have been going for, on the basis that getting that on turn 2 would be really impactful, in much the same way that you're hoping to have got that bedrock on turn 2, right? So in that case, it's just resource efficiency. That's the primary pro here. both in terms of just using the 2 mana on that turn instead of not doing anything with it, and also in terms of getting a magic spell into the cemetery for the Archimago ability at some point further down the track. So that's the biggest reason to want to do it. And then there's a whole bunch of other smaller reasons. So one in that scenario is that you have thinned your deck slightly because you're probably common sense for common sense, which means that there is one less common sense in the deck and a slightly bigger percentage chance that you're now going to draw every other spell on the deck. So it's slightly improving your draw quality. But on the flip side of that, I'm mulliganed a lightning bolt at the start that I really don't want to draw at this point. So you've slightly improved your draw quality, but then you've slightly made it worse as well because you've shuffled the lightning bolt back through. Those things I would say largely sort of balance each other out, but I'd say probably there is a very minor net positive on the draw quality once you combine those two things, but it's very small. So that's one consideration. And then the other consideration here is that if that site in my opponent's hand is a Funeral Pyre and they were to play it anyway on their turn, whether there was no spell in my cemetery or a spell in my cemetery, if you do it this way around, you've given them a little bit of extra value for the Funeral Pyre that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten. That's a really minor consideration as well. There's some other pretty fringe scenarios here. So there's that are in particular if my opponent does not play a frontline side on their turn. So either because they tap the draw site and don't want to play one at all, or because they play a site on the back line. It's pretty bad if they did that, but there's reasons why maybe it's a small possibility, but possibility nonetheless. So in that case, drawing a spell and then a site, there is the bonus chance, if you like, that the site is a Wizard's Den. So let's imagine for a second that the top site at the moment is a Wizard's Den and the top spell is a Common Sense. If you drew a spell this turn, you get to play the Mirror Realm, copy the Bedrock, play the Common Sense. You've got that resource efficiency. Then your opponent has their turn and they don't play a frontline site. So now I'm not forced to have to play a frontline site on my turn. And then I draw a site and I don't want to play a frontline site on my turn because I want to track whatever direction they go. And the site that I draw is, let's say, is a Wizard's Den, and then I could play that on the back row because I'm not forced to have to play in the front row yet, and I could draw a spell. So it's quite a bit. It requires that it basically requires that the top spell was a Common Sense and the top site was a Wizard's Den, which both of those things is incredibly unlikely, but it's a possibility nonetheless. And then there's also a chance that it might be a Philosopher's Stone or the Onyx Core. So that's a 4.3% chance that it might have been one of those. And going down that line, it allows you to ramp up 1 extra mana, but if you play it straight away. But if we go through the turn, I would draw on turn 2, let's say Onyx Core, I tap and I would play the Mirror Realm to copy the Bedrock, and I play the Onyx Core, and I would play nothing else that turn because I would have 2 mana, and the cards that you see in hand would be the cards that I had in hand. And then the following turn, I would want to play the Root Spider on the Bedrock, and I would have 3 mana without playing a site. So I could play the Root Spider without playing a site. But if my opponent played a frontline site, which they almost certainly will on their turn, I still have to play a frontline site anyway on that turn. So I basically end up with 4 mana and I'm playing a Root Spider. So I do get the extra mana, but it doesn't help. It does help, however, if my opponent doesn't play a frontline site, which I think is pretty fringe. So there are some extra benefits here if it's an Onyx Core or a Philosopher's Stone, or in the specific scenario where the site is a Wizard's Den, and my opponent doesn't play a frontline site on their turn. It's pretty fringe, but it's possible, and it's some extra sort of things to consider. So I think that about wraps it up. I was pretty happy with my decision. We both think when you bring all of this together, we both think that it's incredibly close. I think Jarrod is a bit more thinking if it was a stone or a core that he would be more inclined to potentially draw a spell and then draw a spell again. And basically play the Mirror Realm to copy the Bedrock and then play the Perilous Bridge, whichever way they go on their frontline side. But I don't think I would have done that. I think it's because of a playstyle difference there, potentially. I'm pretty comfortable playing in the way that I ended up playing, with just a very defensible setup and sort of being, let's say, patient and taking what my opponent gives me to some degree and trying to sort of exploit any potential, let's say, opportunities they give me or any misplays or anything like that. So I'm more comfortable with that type of play style, where I think so it's a preference thing basically there. I wouldn't have run the risk, I don't think, of just not having, going site and then just being forced potentially to top deck a site and play whatever it is. I felt like that would be really risky, giving them avenue to attack me, and I just don't think that would have been worth it. But it's something that I think Jarrod is more open to with his play style. So in the end, though, it's pretty clear to us that very close decision. So what would you do? Which way would you have done it? Like I did it, or like more like Jarrod is thinking? Let me know. Put a comment below, and also just it's totally plausible that there are things that factor into this decision that we didn't think of. So definitely, if you think of any of those, do put those below. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm going to go back to our original discussion now. Cheers.
So interestingly, with this site placement, at the end of the video with Ira, you actually go through why this one took you so long. And
it's because I play against you too much. That's why.
I understood what was going through your mind with but I think the fact that you brought it up at the end of that video was actually pretty important, right? Because this is potentially the most important site you play for the whole game between both players, where it is.
Yeah.
And both options. I mean, we say both options. We should probably actually lay out what the options are. So where you played it is 12, which is like a good option. And the other good option is 17 in the back. There's obviously the other two options, like, the same sites on the other side, but they are both way worse than playing on the left. There's probably worth bringing up the reasoning behind these things. So where it is now is very good for just locking up the board as it is. Standard reasonings. Just you can't attack into it. You're locking out more sites for you to play in the future. It's a frontline site that they can't attack into. The big reason to play it on 17 at the back, which is one that not a lot of people actually think about quite often, is you're forcing them to take that spot in front, and it's still acting as a frontline site when you have a root spider on that bedrock, because that's just a completely unattackable site. So it makes them play an additional site before they can even get into an attacking spot. It also means that if they have Atlantean Fate to turn off that site, they have to fate over one of their own sites, potentially two if they try and block out the site next to it at 11 as well. So these and where it is, if it ends up on 17, it still does the same job as it does on 12. Is it 12? Yeah, 12. So they're important things, and we consider them just bad on the other side, just because it's not being reactive to where the sites are being played. Because that's, as we're saying in the mulligans, that's like probably the most important thing to do with the deck in general, and the whole reason why we think it's good to be on the draw.
Yep.
Or at least a viable option.
And the other big reason is that, especially from my perspective, because I know what side I have, right? I have tower, and I know that I really do not want that to be the site that has to plug the gap to the left of the Perilous Bridge, and I don't know what other side I might end up drawing. So the other big reason is basically that if it's where it is now, my opponent can wrap around it by playing 2 sites, whereas if it's one further back, my opponent needs to play 3 sites to wrap around it.
Yes.
So I basically have like a lot of... And I know my opponent is not going to want to draw and play a site for the next 3 turns in a row. So if I play it back, I basically have something like, 5 turns or something like that to solve the problem, right? To find the site that plugs the gap. Whereas if I put it here, potentially my opponent draws a site on their turn and plays it, and then I immediately just have to draw a site and potentially can blink to get a side or whatever, but basically I have to plug the gap with whatever the best I can at that point.
Yeah. Yes.
If I was playing against you, by the way, 100% I play it on the back line. So I just took the chance that my opponent wouldn't, be as well versed in punishing this sort of greedy site placement, if you like. I'm basically being greedy, right? By this full, I'm being a little bit greedy by taking this more.
So there's also one other thing that can punish playing this site on 17 that I forgot to mention. It's if they play another floodplain there, and then you can't ever play spiders there. But in this particular site composition, realistically, you're going to try and never move your spiders away from the bedrocks anyway. So it's not the biggest concern.
Yeah, but it was a big, as you said, it was.
It's a massive decision point in the game.
I think for me, it was the biggest decision point probably in the whole game.
I think it's either between this and tapping and drawing for sites for the next 2 turns is also
they were pretty big,
pretty huge decision points.
Yeah,
like I completely understood the one you do next turn without seeing your hand and anything like that. But Ira was a little surprised. He just thought you'd be jamming and just drawing sites and jamming sort of thing. The one that surprised me without seeing their hand is setting yourself back a mana again on the next turn, because I'm assuming, I haven't seen the cards yet, but I'm assuming
I guess.
You really don't want to get down the potentially. I'm assuming it's this and Merlin's, this tower in hand and then Merlin's tower.
Yeah, it is probably, but we'll see. Yeah. So what's happened basically is my opponent has played this side here, right? So. This is probably
what lost him the game.
I think so too, right? So it's this placement here where is basically combined with what I draw, but this is the reason why I do that decision basically, because I'm afforded the luxury of being able to do that because of this site placement. This singular site placement is definitely the biggest misplay of the game, and probably loses. Probably ultimately, if this site is placed next to the desert. I think my opponent probably wins, based on all the rest of the cards we draw and how it plays out. I think my opponent has all the tools to win if he can just find a spot to be able to mount attacks from, basically.
Yes.
Early-ish in the game, and can apply that pressure. And also force me to have to play sites that I don't want to play where I don't want to play them, instead of doing what I'm choosing to do in what order, right? So this is just a big misplay. Probably game losing. I don't. I'm not quite. I think the main reason is it's just normal, right? People always just have this little site configuration like this every single game, and it's just like creature of habit or something like that, right? Like you just used to it.
Yeah, no. More what I was trying to get to the point of is So if he plays this site here, even not taking into consideration wrapping the Perilous Bridge, if he plays a site there. And you just don't play a site on 14, he then has to play another site before he can even start mounting attacks from. And because it's the bedrock with the spider, you then still have to play another site down. So you're multiple sites away before you're even playing sites where you can play minions and attack the turn after from. So it's just playing it there, it just slows you down even more. Playing it there is fine if you assume your opponent is just going to jam a site on 14 and then you can start attacking it.
Yeah, okay. But I 100% know that I'm not, basically.
Exactly.
I 100% know that I'm not because of that route.
Which has come up from massive amounts of hours and hours work of us just working on site placements and how to launch attacks and how to defend on those sort of things, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's just, that's why. The point of doing this analysis to some degree is to try to impart some information, and that might help people, right? So this was absolutely a game that the Druid player could have won if it had just done a couple of things differently. Almost certainly wins this, and potentially that mulligan is part of it, but that's really hard to identify.
Because realistically, like
this
everybody's
is not that hard to. This is not like this is just a straight up mistake. Basically, like,
this information doesn't even just apply to these decks in particular. This applies to every single deck because realistically, this game, your avatar did nothing outside of like having the options for the kill on after you got into Death's Door. I don't think you used like your ability the whole game.
Just to blink,
from memory?
just to get the second blink to get the Djinn on, just to blink.
Yeah, okay. So effectively, you could have been almost any avatar in the game, and it would have played out the same way just because of the way the sites were played out. Realistically, there's probably better avatars that you could have been for how this game played out with this site placements, with this site. Like, imagine if you were Geomancer. All of a sudden, the game's different. It's a little bit more awkward to get your sites down in certain positions. But yeah, that was just off the top of the head. There would be some that would be better. But with that said, it's not an Archimago thing, but everyone's just complaining about Archimago in particular winning heaps of things. So that was just a little rabbit hole that it just popped in my mind while I was thinking about it.
The idea of this placement being incorrect is not an Archimago specific thing, right? It's if they have a perilous bridge that you can wrap or a root spider on a bedrock that you can't do anything to, like the site needs to go to wrap around the perilous bridge.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
That's just sort of a better example of an avatar. It's Elementalist. Elementalist probably would have been better for you this game because it would have sorted out your thresholds so perfectly. But that's by the by.
Yeah.
That's
even potentially just Sorcerer would have been better, right? To have that option to potentially just double draw a spell at some point. Not sure, but yeah, the point is, like we're saying, it's just I used the ability effectively once the whole game, and it was important when it happened, but
I think you had another blink in hand.
Anyway. No, I did. I only had one. I had one. I have one in hand and one in the cemetery. Yeah. So, but anyway, it's a bit by the by. The main point here is just this site placement being incorrect is not something specific to Archimago or this matchup or anything. It's just this board state, bedrock with a root spider and a perilous bridge that you can wrap around against any basically deck, even if it's not a control deck. This is wrong, basically. This is just a mistake. So, and it's probably most of the, I don't know if you want to call them mistakes or even suboptimal plays, but most of the stuff is like, it's not that clear. Let's be fair, right? We know because we've played this deck over 1,000 hours. We played this Firewater type, not just Druid, but Firewater variants, hundreds and hundreds of games. Like, it's not reasonable that other people would know the information about this, but they may have never even played against our sort of Archimago deck ever. So it's not reasonable, right? Whereas this site placement here it's just a mistake. It's got nothing to do with all of that knowledge and all of the matchups and all of that, right? So it's probably the one actual mistake that you could just say is a mistake, as opposed to some kind of could have done it different if you had have known type of thing, right? Yeah,
it could have just been a choice. Yeah, this is just straight up with all the information that's presented.
And it's very interesting that this is immediately after I played that Perilous Bridge and was greedy, right? So I was greedy, and then ultimately this is the exact opposite of being punished for that greed, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just completely let off the hook at this point, right? All pressure alleviated. Miles away from being punished, attacked, anything, right? Looking at this board state, he's got nothing on board. He actually does, I believe he just plays a Colicky Dragonets this turn on the back row, applying no pressure at all, because it can't, because of that site placement, basically. making it completely 100% locked in at this point that I know for a fact that he's got Ruler of Thorn now because he's played it on the back row. Because of this
interestingly, I don't think him playing it on the back row signifies that he definitely has Ruler. What I read this as, it's not with the site composition. It's never attacking, so there's no point playing it one square up where it can die to lightning bolts. Where it is, it's still always going to be doing its ping damage, which is all it's going to do anyway. So the difference between playing it there and in front, because you still want to play it so that it can still ping, doesn't 100% signify that it's ruler of
it's
flow,
not just that. It's the combination of the two that 100% signified it. The combination of that site placement not being to wrap around the bridge, with the Colicky Dragonets not being on the floodplain to ping away the tawny and then move towards the Valley of the Light, that if the so on my turn, let's say I'm forced to play a tower there in front of the Valley of the Light, next to the bridge, and then the Colicky Dragon is on the floodplain, then it's just going to move across and attack, right? So it's the combination of the two. It's because my opponent isn't thinking of, the reason why he's not wrapping around the bridge is because he's not thinking about wrapping around the bridge. He's thinking about something else, right? Basically. And what else could that possibly be?
I mean, it could also just be that you read it as he's made a mistake playing the site where it is.
Yeah, I just choose to believe that that it's not. It is a mistake, but I'm thinking in terms of, you've got to.
Because realistically, if he's on the fact that it's he's just going to set up a ruler turn, it shouldn't even be on the front line. It should be on the back line. If he played it on the back line, that 100% signifies that he's like going all in on ruler.
I'm definitely.
Because it's not a fire site, because he had to play it as a fire site, is another reason why it's probably just on the front because he wants some water on the back. And that was another thing I was going to mention. So if you didn't go for the greedy site placement and went for 17 instead, he still wouldn't want to play that valley in Splot 12 where the bridge is now, because he has to make it fire. So, because you really want water sites near their sites, so it's still a little bit awkward on the placement. So, I think either way, you would have gotten away with the greedy placement or the safe placement. But yeah, where the valley is now is just
But I think the other mistake here ultimately though is that because my opponent drew the valley this turn and played it, and if he wanted to play a site on turn 4. He should have already drawn it on turn 2 or 3. And the only real exception to that should be because of whatever he drew on turn 3, right? So, but broadly speaking, that's what you would want to do. So something is a bit off there as well, that he's sort of just top decked a site and then he has to jam that site no matter what it is somewhere.
So I think the reason why he was probably drawing spells is because he just hasn't had any action, right? Like, I mean, potentially he could have, if he had the Dragonets in hand already, he should have drawn for the site to try and get the fire threshold on last turn.
I can only assume that he top decked the Dragonets.
I'm just trying to work out if he would have played the floodplain there, because potentially that was a mistake that we didn't even mention, right? He didn't play the floodplain reactively, and he didn't need the water threshold straight away.
Well, sort of. You absolutely should, but also I was never going to let him do that. Like, I was never going to front run a side before he did something anyway. So, and
because he's on the play, he potentially doesn't realistically get a chance to play it reactively anyway. So it might just be fine there. But there's also the world where he plays that there, and it doesn't even have to be a bedrock in front of it. It could have been the bridge or like a Gnome Hollows or something, and then all of a sudden his attacks. He's just getting in for the one with the tawny, which is potentially relevant, but. When that's the reason to want the floodplain there. So overall, from the way he played out his sites, would make me think he didn't have the Dragonets to start with. And he's drawn it over the last couple of turns. And that's why he's had to try and draw for a fire threshold instead of like even tap drawing site and jamming potentially. I think that's why he was drawing spells originally, to try and get some action on the board. instead, and so that he could then start tap drawing sites and being.
Yeah, it feels at this point it's like, man, it would be helpful if we could see his cards, or if he was on this call with us. So to just chip in with because we're sort of theory crafting a lot here. But yeah.
Well, I mean, if we assume through Ira's commentary that the 3 cards on the right of his hand are Geyser, Fate, and Thule, that means that he hasn't really had any action. He's had to draw spells to try and draw some action to make those cards become relevant.
Yeah.
Because you really don't want to just cycle the Geyser. Potentially, because I had the Fate, I think if I was playing it out, I realistically would have just cycled the Geyser after seeing, especially once I'd seen 1 Bedrock,
2 Bedrocks,
and then I definitely would have cycled it on a 3 once I'd seen the 2nd Bedrock. But on turn 2, I potentially still would have just cycled the Geyser once I'd already seen a Bedrock, and been like, only because he still has the Fate. If I only had one or the other, I definitely wouldn't have cycled it. But because you already have 2 answers to the Spiders, potentially you can just get away with cycling that to try and get into some action. And then, especially once you get rid of that card that was basically dead in his hand for the whole game, you're a card deeper. You know when you need to draw your sites, or if you have the ability to just tap draw sites instead. So it potentially, even just not cycling that on turn 2 is thrown the game into a really awkward position for him, where he's just had to both try and draw spells to have some action to try and get some pressure up, while also still not having the thresholds or just enough sites to be able to get onto the board in a position to force you into playing sites.
Yeah, so kind of like all the reasons why I should choose to go second, for example. Just
yeah, sure.
Basically, in summary.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just
so he's going to ping. He's going to ping his Tawny to kill it.
Yep.
Right. So this is my turn, and I think this is the first time that Ira's surprised. And this is basically like, I don't have to play a site this turn.
Yeah. So I think Ira's surprised because he was just assuming you would draw a site so that you can play a site this turn. Whereas because everything we discussed about like the site positioning and how we know it works, we know you have the ability to tap draw this turn, basically, and still get spells up. And still keep drawing spells, because you need, your spell counts. It's not too bad. So I think you do have the option of just even drawing a site this turn. But I didn't mind what you did at all. I thought it was pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking in turn. I got Earthquake, I got Bedrocks, right? I got Angel's Egg to give him a risk. Like, I got time here, and my, it's purely due to this Valley of the Light placement, by the way. I have to draw a site if it's placed next to the desert, but because it isn't, I'm just thinking I don't have to play a site. I can be reactive still. I'll wait to see where their next site. I can draw a spell. I got time. I'm honestly thinking I'm good. I got time. The most important thing, I'm so defensible with this setup. I've got Divine Healing. Like, what I don't want to do is just give my opponent somewhere to attack freely. Basically, right? Yep. So I need to stall that for as long as possible. So that's kind of all that I'm thinking. And I
think one thing to mention with this is quite a few of our testing games, you would have, because of if that valley is on the other side where it should be, you probably this game would have drawn a site for your turn and gone, this isn't a site for the front line that I want to jam next to the bridge, so you would tap draw anyway, but you would be up an extra site and you just have more site options to try and dig for.
I mean, possibly I blink, by the way, to draw a site as well. I probably blink to draw a site. I draw for turn. If it's no good, I then blink to draw a site, and then if it's still no good, I do what you said.
Yep.
So, but you definitely, if you had another bridge or a Gnome Hollows or whatever, you definitely plug in that gap if you have that site.
Yeah.
But because that didn't happen, I just draw a spell for turn, and then I'm just going to blink. I think I just draw a spell off the blink, just because there's just no pressure. Like, there's literally no pressure at all on me.
Yeah. So one thing I would say is, what made you decide between blink and missiles this turn? Because
just because I know that I'm going to cast Angel's Egg. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
So
Just because I know that I have Angel's Egg and
divine healing.
Divine Heal, I know that this 1 damage just doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
and if he Ruler of Thoughts and comes across, I'm totally happy just to lock down all of that with the Root Spider.
Yeah, well, even without that, you'd still be able to go Tower Earthquake.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's basically
it's
yeah,
just
you don't play
it's just a
you're trying
complete
to
lack
play
of
the roller.
pressure is the reason,
Yeah.
right? Like if it was that and another minion that was smacking me down, I absolutely would want to get one of them off the board. But between having the Divine Healing and the Angel's Egg, I'm
So
thinking
my main consideration with just missilesing this turn, I think the blink is correct, by the way. It's just you sort of want to chip down their valuable units while you can, is basically my thing, because he's trying to, like, at this point you've put him on full, he's trying to just build up for an alpha, so potentially just chipping away as many minions while you can, because like potentially he puts like a cat in front because he knows he's not going to rule this turn, right? So then he just puts it there as like a blocker, things like that, like maybe you won't be able to missiles it down at some point, maybe the Tawny gets in the way, maybe the Bruin gets in the way at some point. There's a few little things that could happen which makes missiles not be able to kill the Dragonettes in like an important moment is basically my thing. But I think digging is probably more important at this point because, as you're saying, right, you got so much healing, you don't care about the damage that much.
And there's a lot of cards that are just totally awesome if I draw them as well.
Yeah, the one other option that you could have done this turn is also just to play the egg for efficient mana because you're expecting to play a site next turn, which you didn't end up doing. But
so
because
a part of that, by the way,
potentially
is I wanted him to be content with the board state.
Yep.
And if I play the Angel's Egg, I then let him know that the board state is no longer acceptable to him. Like, pinging is no good anymore. He's not chipping anywhere. And I was happy to sort of bait him into thinking, to just be happy with the odd little bit of chip damage, to thinking he's going to get me down to 15 or 14 to be able to Alpha Strike. So I didn't want to sort of send the signal that, that's not going to happen. So please make sure you draw a sight to wrap around my Perilous Bridge as fast as possible. Kind of thing. So it was like that was more about sending the correct signals, right? So and that's also part of the reason why I didn't Magic Missiles the Dragonettes, right? Like I just wanted my opponent to feel comfortable with the current game state because I know this current game state is totally fine for me. So I didn't want to sort of pressure them into doing basically what I really don't want them to do.
Right? Like, so this turn he drew spell and then tapped drew sight and basically passed, right? So there's a potential if you get him into a state where he doesn't feel as comfortable, he draws a sight, plays a sight, potentially plays a minion, and then all of a sudden it's like a different, or even, yep. I think it's all good.
So it actually worked out basically completely perfect, right? Like in that. I mean, you don't know what other plays he could have made, but it's just
realistically. There's also a world where he draws a sight that turn for his turn, plays it next to your Root Spider Bedrock, and then Atlantean Fates on the other side where the bridge is, turns off your air threshold, and then it basically forces you into playing sights next to your other Bedrock on 19, and then all of a sudden he has an attack location as well. So that's also something that he probably potentially could have done this turn, because you already have the 2 Bedrocks, he's never going to get great Atlantean Fate value, and it's probably always going to end up on the bridge anyway. So it's also a pretty good spot to just jam the Atlantean Fate instead of just passing a whole turn. You also end up getting the Tawny into play if you do that as well, so then you can start chip damaging on top of it. So I think, overall he definitely should have drawn a sight that turn instead of...
And you're forcing an attack location to happen, pretty much. You will be able to, like, you're bringing forward that
because you can either attack on the site that you're forced to play on 19, or you can just load up and start attacking the bridge because it's now a water site and turn it off. So
Yep. And potentially, if I kill that Dragoness, by the way, that's exactly what happens this turn. Maybe. Hard to say, right? But potentially.
Probably no. He probably tries to draw a minion, right? for his turn, and then tap draws. So I think the turn probably still ends up being the same. But yeah, I do know what you're saying.
Not sure. Yeah, it's hard to. Yeah, I think here is just I was saying, do I have the right amount of life? I was querying if I should have one less, and then it was like, no, I'd hit the 20. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, hit the 20.
Yep.
So that's what that was all about. So I think my opponent has passed, and this is where I draw a spell, and I think I'm going to tap and draw a sight.
Yep, which was.
This is what's really shocking, and tell me why I should not have done that. Because I feel like it was a no-brainer, just about.
I think it's fine. So I suppose
I feel like there's nothing surprising about it. Like, it's absolutely the right decision. I did it really fast. How long did I still to draw my card? Like, I was super fast to do these actions. It was just boom, boom. Like, I barely thought at all.
So if we go down the devil's advocate route of like playing a sight this turn instead of drawing a sight, which I think you're right in drawing a sight, by the way. You get another tower into play. You get your egg down. You get a missiles out to kill the dragon ants, and then you're set up for being able to go tower barrage next turn if you need a barrage for 6. And then you're basically getting into the action spot of potentially having stuff to flashback and churning through your engine that way. But the way you played it out, I think the tap drawer is just better. But only because he tap drew himself. If he played a sight, you're forced into playing a sight somewhere, because otherwise that's when you start getting in the position that Ira was talking about, where you get locked down to less than 8 sights. And that's like... It doesn't even matter if you get out of the lock with the Earthquake. Like, getting locked under 8 sights is very awkward and hard to play out of. Because if you have to Earthquake yourself out, you end up getting your sights put into really bad positions where they can just start attacking your sights for free and you can't really defend them very well. But where you're at the moment, even if he plays... So, on his next turn, even if he plays a sight on 14... you still have 6 sites available that he can't lock. 8 sites available that you can't lock you out of, and that's all that really matters. Going above 8, it's nice, and you can really use the mana. But you less than 8, you're in real trouble. 8, you're a happy spot. Anything above, you're like, this is sweet. So
yeah, and I do already have the Earthquake in hand if it comes to it, like ultra late game, right? So, but yeah, I was just. At this point, I'm really thinking, he can't attack me. If he had ways to do it, he would already be doing it, right? And he's not punishing me at all, putting pressure on with the site placements. Yep. So,
and he didn't develop anything last turn, so good spot.
So I just sort of feeling like play it safe, pretty much draw a spell, because I really don't have a path to victory still. Like, I don't have card draw. I don't have any way to win, and the way that the site plays, he's going to presumably play that site next turn, and I'm thinking I probably will need a reactive frontline site. He's either going to put it in, I'm assuming he's either going to put it next to the desert or in front of the Valley of Light, and I really need to counter that with a good frontline site.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm tapping to draw a site to increase the chances that I get a good frontline site. And then I just play the egg for, mana efficiency, basically. And the only other real play was the magic missiles, but I think this is better for the mana efficiency. And
yeah, I think, and it's just the egg just turns off the dragon anyway. And this is at the point where you sort of want to start getting your egg, like ticking your life back up a little bit anyway, because otherwise you'd be down to 17, and then starts getting into the range of, if he played a threat on top of the 20 that he's going to get for playing a sight, all of a sudden he's starting to get a decent chunk of damage. So he drew a spell this turn?
Yeah, he tapped drew the sight last turn.
Yeah.
He drew a spell. I'm not sure. Is this the sight placement that goes... I think he goes next to the... he puts a floodplain, I think, this turn next to the desert from memory.
Desert, right? Yeah. I remembered that it was a site next to the desert. I didn't remember what the site was. So
I think it's a floodplain. Pretty sure about that. I'm pretty sure it's coming this turn. And I'm sort of having a bit of a sad moment looking at my 3 sites in hand, pretty much. Thinking that...
Because there's no front line, but at least you're like... You got 2 towers and you're in the mid game, you got your good threshold, so it could be worse for sure.
Yeah,
but it would be nice to have a front line site.
And then I'm also thinking, man, imagine if that valley was there and then the floodplain is coming down next to the Perilous Bridge right now.
Yep.
Like, imagine that. That's basically game ending, just about, right? If it happened that way. So
yeah, I mean, you still have the earthquake to reposition the floodplain away, which is pretty important. But yeah, it is. It puts you into a much worse position. That's for sure. Is that all he plays this turn? Does he pass after this? Yeah, he does, right? So this is another turn where he could have just played the Atlantean Fate on the Perilous Bridge corner and really screwed you around. Takes you off of air threshold, which is pretty important.
Yeah, and also kind of not directly blocks, but the sort of only good spot that I have to put a site that isn't a frontline site is behind the Perilous Bridge, right? Because if I put it next to the right of the bedrock, then my opponent can just put something in front of his valley, right, and immediately attack it. So the only good spot I've got for a non-frontline site is just that one spot. That's it, right? Yeah, so if there's an Atlantean Fate sitting over there, then depending on what that site is, right, it doesn't even do anything.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because if you have to play a windmill there, you feel real bad. But if you get to play a tower there, it's not, and it feels fine. But yeah.
I'm just saying that the Atlantean Fate there is even a little bit better than what you said, because it's also like making my one decent spot to play sites quite restrictive, basically.
I think there's almost every turn this game I'm like, he probably should have played Atlantean Fate on that corner. There's a big one coming later where he has like a cat and stuff. There's a big part of having the Atlantean Fate there is it makes your sites water, and then you're safe to attack them. So you can't like get earthquake, buried, all those, spiders, all those sort of things. Makes it like it forces you into having either the common sense to get the dispel or the dispel itself. And as you're showing this game, you don't get a common sense for quite a while. So, and if your first common sense, you couldn't just churn through your whole deck and get all your common senses out and had to stop straight away and get a dispel, potentially you don't even draw into all the right cards that you need to just close out the game.
Yep. Yeah, but I'm acutely aware of the Atlantean Fate this whole game as well, which is like I'm really aware of it, like in all the sort of, obviously the Ruler of Thor as well, because I know he's got it, but the Atlantean Fate, I'm like suspicious in a way, because there's just sort of...
He's he clearly only has reactive cards in hand with the way the game's been playing out, where he hasn't had anything to do. He's either sitting on all reactive cards plus Ruler, which you've put him on, or he's just drawn like double Infernal Legion and like some other 5-drops and stuff that he hasn't been able to play yet. And because he skipped this turn without playing any 5s, you're basically putting him on, all right, it's all reactive cards. Like maybe he has Disintegrates in his deck and he hasn't been able to play them yet, or Polymorphs, or all those various like just straight up minion cards that are dead, or he's sitting on like Atlantean Fate Geysers and all that sort of stuff.
So I'm about to draw. I can tell you, I'm pretty sure I know what I was thinking here. So I'm looking at my hand thinking, man, I really don't want to draw a site when I already got 3 sites in hand. Pretty much, and the odds of drawing an actual
frontline site
is pretty slow. Like, obviously, if I knew what the top site was, and if I knew it was a frontline site, I would draw it for sure. But I don't know what it is, and the odds of it being basically the other Perilous Bridge or one of the Gnome Hollows is pretty slim. So
it's what, 4 in 21?
Yeah, I think that's right. So, and I was like, I'm going to draw a spell.
Especially
basically,
if you're also putting him on, Atlantean Fate, you're also like, it doesn't really matter as much to have the frontline site anyway, because you're expecting him to just turn it off. And the fact, if you had 2 frontline sites there, he probably would have actually clued in and made the right play of just Atlantean Fating over there. And so it's probably worked out better for you that you didn't have a frontline site.
Yeah, and I was also just thinking about the floodplain, to be honest, because it's a bit awkward for my opponent. They don't have a site in hand, for example, so I know if they're gonna, if they're going to put a site in front of the floodplain, it has to be whatever they top deck. And it's not going to feel great for them to put like a fire site, like a non-water site there to mount the attacks from.
Sure.
They would much rather me put a bad site there and attack from the floodplain. So I'm taking a risk to basically leave that there, but I don't. There's also every chance my opponent just doesn't want to even draw a site for their turn, right? Because they don't have any plays. So so I'm sort of taking a risk in one sense, thinking even if my opponent draws a site, if it's not a water site, it's not that bad if they play it there. And then also that they probably don't even want to draw a site. So it's not that risky not plugging the gap this turn. It's not guaranteed that they're going to, fill it, is what I'm thinking. So I basically draw a spell. The other part of that is I'm looking at my hand thinking, right, so I can magic missiles to dragonettes and pass, basically.
Yeah, which was pretty terrible.
So I want to, I need some more spells that do things. And this is where I get that second root spider, which I'm sort of happy to see. Just because I'm pretty sure he's got Ruler of Thol, so I was totally happy to jam that root spider under. And the other thing at this point, I'm like, well, let's see if he does have that. Like, let's see about that Atlantean Fate. Sort of as I'm somewhat thinking here. So I put the windmill down, knowing that I still have 2 air thresholds in hand, and I want to know if I need to dig for sites or not to get that 3rd earth threshold if I need it for the divine healings. So I end up basically putting the windmill down and putting it in that one spot that we described. And
this is your 3rd earth threshold.
What's that? Sorry.
This is your 3rd earth threshold.
It's 3rd now, but basically, if he plays Atlantean Fate, he switches it off, right?
Yeah. So you played it on the left here. I would have played it on the right.
Oh, okay.
No, I see why you play it there.
I'm playing it there because I don't want him to be able to attack me. I just want to. At this point, I feel like he's clearly in no rush to do it. So I'm thinking in terms of I take what he gives me, and I'm not sort of offering up stuff for free, basically. So
yeah, because I was thinking you play. I got my turns mixed around. I thought you played a tower this turn. And played spider and missiles, but because you could potentially put the tower in some good spots as well. Like if the tower's there, it means Atlantean Fate doesn't kill spiders when you put it there. Mm-hmm. If the tower's in front of the valley, you can do the same. Of course, he's sitting on Geyser, so that wouldn't have worked out well for you. But yeah, I think, and the problem with putting there's pluses and minuses to putting the windmill there, right? Like it's if you're putting him on Atlantean Fate, it feels pretty bad putting the windmill there, because then all of a sudden you're on no air thresholds, your 3rd Earth is gone, and you need to play. Like you basically have to draw sites to turn on your divine healings and your not your barrage, but you won't be able to play the barrage on the following turn anyway. So that doesn't feel great. You also wouldn't have been able to earthquake your way out of that problem, because you can't move your bedrocks from under the Atlantean Fate, and you can't get the windmill over to his side. Mm-hmm. So that's... But whereas if you play the windmill on the other side, you lose that spot of ever being a good frontline site, but you don't get blown out by Atlantean Fate. So it's pros and cons.
Yeah, but I don't feel like I get blown out by it. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like I just don't get blown out by it. So I feel like if he's got it, now it's coming down, and I'm not.
So there is a turn that you should have been blown out by Atlantean Fate with the windmill there when you move the spider over there. He had. We'll get to it later, but there was a really good turn that he should have played it there, and he just didn't. Whereas if you had the windmill on the other side, that wouldn't have come up, because the windmill would have been on the other side with the spider under it, so he wouldn't have been able to get as much value. But none of those things happen. So.
We'll see. Yeah, when we get there, I think he could have just played the Atlantean Fate on the other side, but we'll see.
No, because there was a cat that gets to attack.
The cat would be on the other side, obviously, if that's where the Atlantean Fate was going to go.
No, we'll get there, and it's obvious that the cat still would have been on that side.
Okay. It's getting
But yeah,
a bit
when I
maybe
saw this,
a bit
when I
too
saw this
hypothetical. This is the
when I
type
come
of
out-
conversations we have all the time, by the way, but it's probably a bit...
yeah, like
a bit
we'll
much.
take hours to get through games sometimes.
So
just
I played the
through,
Root Spider that turn, in any case, so I'm thinking, yeah, it's just...
When I
that
saw
it's-
this come down, I was like, "This game is over. Like you are not losing this game from here," sort of thing.
Well, that's how I felt. I felt like it was
So there's
mine to
also
lose.
actually, I just thought of
at this
another thing
point.
with the windmill being on the back line. There's potential you just play it in the front line because you are putting him on Ruler of Thor, right? So you just play all your sites in the front and then just don't only ever have the bedrock as your back site until it's too late,
Yeah.
and then he can never Ruler of Thor you because he can't ever get the spider off of that site.
Yeah.
And if he's just hitting the minions like up the front, they're going to be small. You're probably never getting one shot, and you have double divine healing and earthquakes. So you're probably that might have even been better, to be honest, because then you can actually start leveraging your divine healing instead of having dead cards in hand.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if there's a possibility for me to not play any sites on the back line at any point in the whole game
Well,
and win.
the way I'm thinking about it, I mean, maybe because he's got 2 sites where he can play to block you off from being able to play all your front 5. Maybe that's why you can't do it. But if that wasn't the case, I think that is another option to try and play around Ruler of Thor.
So this was the point where, because he didn't land in Fate now, I'm trying to think what he does this turn.
He didn't draw a sight that turn either.
Yeah.
He drew a spell. I mean, unless the spell he drew that turn was Infernal Legion, that seems weird. Because Infernal Legion is still just a dude you can jam on the board, right? But this is, yeah, if he doesn't... Because I know he doesn't play Fate this turn. I think he might play a cat on the floodplain, maybe?
Well, he definitely doesn't play Fate this turn because he doesn't play it the whole game.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? That's what I was thinking. Because this is another turn where Fate would have been absolutely amazing just on that corner.
Yeah,
And then
but this was a turn because he didn't play it. I was like, well, maybe he doesn't have it laying in Fate. And then I guess maybe that was his plan, though, right? To to make me think that he doesn't have it laying in Fate. So
And the awkward thing about him attacking there is now it makes his Alanian Fate play even more awkward because then he'd have to like move the Tawny away. But I think he moved it there because he's trying to set up for Ruler of Thor. That's another reason why he should have drawn a sight that turn, so that he could match your windmill sight placement that turn, so that he could start loading up minions in the back to set up for Ruler of Thor onto windmill.
Yep. And again, I think I'm going to tap and draw a side again this turn, just again because my opponent didn't play a side again, right? Like
Remember, I guess he didn't.
I don't.
Yeah, because he didn't, it gives you the option to not do it.
Yeah.
Whereas if he plays sites, you just have to play your sites, and you have to draw sites for turn instead of drawing spells. Like, you're very happy if the game gets to this state where you're both just doing nothing and you're both just tap drawing sites.
But like, it's kind of crazy that I don't even know what turn this is. Is this turn like
I think it's turn 8.
turn
It's
8?
either 7 or 8, yeah.
And I've only
it's turn
got
8.
4 sights down. It's kind of crazy.
Must be turn 7, because you've tapped drawn 3 times. And you were on the draw. So I'd say turn 7.
So I think my opponent plays an Oasis this turn. I think next to the Bond
On the back line.
Yeah, that's a sight.
Windmill.
So yeah, for sure he has
Ruler. Yeah.
Ruler. Like, I was already pretty sure the whole time, but now it's just like, yeah, okay. He absolutely, like, because it's a water site, he could have put it next to the bridge, right? An attack from a water site there. So it's like,
and realistically, he probably should have.
I think so, especially because the Ruler, nothing happened for the Ruler play. No setup, no nothing much. Anyway, did he play? Does he play 2 cats this turn? Maybe there is a bit of setup.
So there's reason for him to play it up the front, because if he plays it next to the front, he can play the
I don't
Infernal
think
Legion.
this is the turn that he plays the 2 cats. I think it's... Can't remember
I
what
think
he
he
does
plays
this turn.
one and then passes maybe, or plays one and a warhorse or something. No, maybe he had the warhorse in hand for the reader. I can't remember. It's all blurring
I think
together
the
now.
double cat. There is a turn where he puts a cat on the floodplain and a cat on the oasis, but I think that's after when I played a site next to the. I don't think that's his turn. I don't remember what he does this turn.
When there's a cat, so this is why he should have put the Oasis up there, right? So that he can play the Infernal Legion and have it on a spot where it can attack and not hit him in the
that's
face.
This turn. Okay,
That's
this is like,
okay.
This feels so bad.
So
This is your turn.
he's just sitting here going, I need to play something, and this potential it basically gets in 2 damage, which feels, and you're really not set up for the ruler play. So
that Oasis 100% should not be there if it's not even being you're not even setting up for Yeah, if you don't want to play it next to the Perilous Bridge, don't play it, but just don't play it at all or something. I don't know, but it doesn't feel good, that one. I don't know.
This is also another turn where he should have just played the Atlantean Fate.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and that's why when this has happened, this is why I'm thinking, I'm definitely thinking in terms of maybe obviously you always want to play around Atlantean Fate, but I'm just... there's just sort of various bits here. Just his reluctance to want to do anything in those 2 sites, if you know what I mean. Sort of has got me suspicious. So I was sort of thinking he had it the whole time and was very much playing around it. But at this point, I'm like, maybe he doesn't have it, if you know what I mean. So, and like I said, maybe that was his plan though, right? To bait me into putting a Root Spider there or something. So it's not sure.
I think that's why he didn't play it for so long, because you had the Root Spiders, and he's like, maybe he'll move it off at one point, but because he has the Geyser, I think so. Basically, my line of thinking for this whole game is you need to burn one of those cards to have some action. So you either cycle the Geyser early to try and get some juice, and you save the Fate for if you ever move off, or you just jam the Atlantean Fate for the last 3 turns in that corner, and they're all good every single turn for messing with your thresholds, for you having water sites, for then he doesn't even need to set up a ruler play, he can just actually attack. So awkward.
So I'm just playing the tower. I think I end up putting the tower there and the Ritter there. I think I'm thinking obviously I don't want to hover it over the board. Ideally I would, this is a bit, I don't know if it's a misplay of the word, but obviously I should decide and then just put it straight on the board to not let my opponent sort of feel the indecisiveness of my decision.
So
but I'm mulling.
I thought you were trying to decide on where to put, if you wanted to put it there or in front of the floodplain.
That's correct. I was,
or one more thought was, if you wanted to have it one back and have the reader in a really safe place where it's basically impossible for him to kill it. That was my other line of thinking. I'm like, maybe that's what you were thinking, but then I was like,
okay. Well, I was thinking between those 3 options, right? So but I eliminated the backline option on the basis that he's got Ruler of Thought anyway, and that
so it's not even safe there. It's actually safer in the front line against Ruler. Yeah,
so I pretty much eliminated that, and then I was just umming and ahhing between either in front of the floodplain or here, and then the reason why I ultimately went for here instead of the floodplain is just because I was still quite suspicious that he had Atlantean Fate. Basically, if I put the tower there, he in front of the floodplain, he just floods it with the floodplain, plays Atlantean Fate, right? Kills the Ritter, switches off my thresholds, and I basically go from a winning position to potentially a losing position.
Yeah,
right. Because I also don't have an answer to Atlantean Fate, so. The reason before, the difference here, right, is that I was trying to bait out the Atlantean Fate before, to some degree, right? If he switched off the windmill on the Perilous Bridge, it's not great, but it's not instantly game losing, right? Just because he did it. Whereas now it's that was supposed to be bait, whereas this isn't bait, right? This is just completely forcing it if it happens.
That would be actual value for it.
So that's why I was still highly suspicious that he had it. And then I thought, I'll put it here. It's possible that there are cards that he can deal with this now that would be more awkward if it was on the other side. Disintegrate in particular. But at the end of the day, I just thought...
Yeah, well, if it's on the
I think
other
he's
side,
got Atlantean Fate. It's possible Disintegrate's not even in the deck. So
no, but the bird can disintegrate it on those 4 squares anyway.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And... there is some other. There isn't really. How do you say? Like much. I was still fairly certain he had an Alien Fate at the end of the day, and that was the predominant reason. And then I was sort of just thinking of the other cards, and I was just like, yeah, there's not really much that is going to kill it because it's here and not on the other side anyway. That's why it ended up here. And then there's a whole other thread here where I don't really have a lot to work with my hand, and actually if Ritter can hit,
if
then
Ritter
Barrage I'm potentially within victory range with my current hand if Ritter gets to lay some smacks down.
I do think with this hand in particular, Ritter needs to be in an attacking position, basically.
So that's in
also,
short.
the other bonus to having the Ritter there is if Infiltrate is his answer, you can still step over with the Spider and turn it off, which is pretty important.
Yep.
And I don't know how many cards you had in hand when you ginned him at the end of the game, but I'm assuming the 6 damage from Ritter was very important for that. Did it?
No, I had 2 cards left in my hand, so
okay.
Yes
so
and
I didn't
no.
actually.
Yes and no, depending on how you look at it. But
yeah,
I mean, I don't think it would have been in the end because my opponent didn't have Funeral Pyre. But yeah, but again, part of that is potentially their mulligan at the start as well. By the way, so.
Sure. And also the unwillingness to ever draw sights for his turn, realistically.
He drew one. He drew the Valley, right? And then...
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah,
and then the rest of the tap draws when he wasn't really doing anything. But maybe that's... He probably had one of those... He clearly has one of those awkward hands where he needs both sights and spells at the same time to do anything. And he sort of... I think he was just relying on you not drawing the ways to kill him quickly. And he just needs to tap, draw, and draw, basically, just to try and get juice. Because clearly he's drawing cards that are bad for the matchup, like Fire Breathing and things like that. Right? And you've got like the Bedrocks to stop the other cards that were good, that are turning him into dead cards. So very awkward situation for him, for sure.
He plays Infernal Legion this turn, and I'm like... It's pretty awkward, that one, because ideally he'll play it on the floodplain, right? But then it's going to hit his own Druid at the end of the turn if he does.
Does he? No, you could also flip for Bruin when you do that play.
Yep.
Because then you just take no damage. But then that sets up for a pretty sweet Craterize. Which you're nowhere near, so that doesn't actually matter.
Yeah, but maybe that was a decent line. But, I mean, then you've got yeah, maybe that was a decent line to flip for the yeah, not sure about that one, but maybe it was good. But in the end, he puts the Legion on the Valley.
Yeah, which lets you bury it.
Yeah.
Which is... and even if you didn't draw the bury that turn, you could have still Earthquaked it, so...
He's thinking a lot, though, and it's...
I think it's because he has so many different ways of dealing with the Reader.
Yeah, and that's what I concluded, right? So I concluded that this Reader is dead. It could be dead, but the reason why that Infernal Legion is there is because the card, like, he might have had to run 2 powers into it or something, right? And he wants to save those for the Ruler Strike.
He's drawn his card for his turn, right? I think he drew a spell, right? Because there's also the option in his hand of if he draws a sight, he can Geyser that and still Atlantean Fate it. So there was I think he's already drawn a spell, so that's not something that he's really thinking about. But yeah.
So he does draw. No, yeah, okay. So he taps and draws. Yeah,
that's what I
but
thought.
that probably would have been. Well, yeah. That would have potentially been all right as well, right? But
yeah. Oh, also one thing I just popped in my mind because I was thinking about the Shadow Strike and how it deals with the thing. When you have against this deck in particular, you've got the Egg underground like that. You should drop it from your Spider so that it can't be just a rocked anymore. And there's no way for him to get under there and take it back to his side before you can react, basically. So That's the only way to get rid of the egg from under there.
Yeah, that was a misplay for sure. I think if I'm playing against you, I'd definitely do that because you would play that card in your deck. I wonder if.
Yeah, nobody else is really playing it. It's just a small little thing that's.
But yeah, absolutely, it's
right?
another
tiny
misplay.
Little misplay, but
second misplay, one more misplay, and it's an automatic loss. Maximum 2 per game, I think, right? Or is it maximum 0? Can't remember.
Maximum 0 for me. But overall,
but that's not insignificant though, because it is Firewater, right? So they can't run Disenchanted. It's the only answer they can possibly have. So it's not unreasonable to run that card in the deck. So it's. I
know I've been liking it in Firewater variants.
So the Berry and the Smack. I'll talk about the Smack a bit because that potentially means that it's a little bit more killable there than otherwise would have been. But I think we covered this a bit before. I got the Arcane Barrage, so I'm thinking. Couple of things. So one, if he kills it, getting that 6 damage in, this is potentially really meaningful. 6 damage.
Well, realistically, it's you kill it and you're still set up for just flashback barrage for lethal, like for death's door, basically.
Yeah, well, ignoring Bruin coming in, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's forcing him into flip for Bruin instead of playing a site or drawing a site. It means Tawny doesn't get to be a thing anymore. There's a lot of reasons why you want to force him to flip.
Yep.
And if you can force him to flip by just attacking with a reader, because even, like, it still would have died where if it didn't attack as well, is the other thing, because it's charge minion plus Shadow Strike.
Yeah, so, I mean, I didn't know, obviously, that was...
Yeah, but I think, like, a lot of the things that kill it from...
It's going to kill it regardless.
He's probably going to kill it there. The only card is if he Atlantean Fates himself, realistically. And that's what I thought he was going to do on his turn, because I had no idea what was in his hand, right? But I'd put him on Fate, and Ira had said it a bunch of times, so I was like, Fate's obviously, just fading that, getting rid of Breeder, sure.
Yep.
You lose a fire threshold, which sucks, but, these things happen.
But also, I'm sort of thinking he's got Fate, but I'm sort of like, I'm mixed signals on the Fate, right? The Ruler of Thor, I know 100%. The Fate, I'm like, I've got to play around it, but at the end of the day, the 6 damage matters a lot. And
the other thing with attacking is it puts him on a clock, so it forces him into not just loading up for a ruler turn, and he has to expend a charge minion and a Shadow Strike, right? Which are both really good on a ruler turn anyway. Like either of them. Obviously, it's pretty hard to play ruler and both of them on the same turn, but you get to play one or the other. So that removes 2 more cards that are good with ruler. Takes a whole turn. It's just all good, right? Whereas if you don't attack, potentially he just goes... Screw it, plays 2 cats on Oasis and goes, do you have the Crater Eyes? If you do, you win. If you don't, I'm setting up for a pretty significant attack, probably a one-shot. And then it doesn't matter if the minions don't untap and the reader stays alive. It's who kills who first.
I mean, that's another thing I was conscious of, that, the Ridder's ability doesn't necessarily matter that much clearly in this game. Clearly my opponent this whole time has been setting up for an Alpha Strike. So... It's like the ability doesn't actually matter that much. Like if he had obviously a couple of cats on board or something, I'm handling this situation completely different if it's keeping a couple cats that were hitting me tap down.
Absolutely, for sure.
Yep. But and then there's also a version of this where actually my opponent just can't kill it, and it just wins a game.
Yeah,
all by itself, right? Like probably you can kill it, but that that whatever it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, whatever it may be, chance that's just the case. That's a factor here, right? You just attack because if he doesn't kill it, you just win.
Yeah.
Basically, right? Because I've got Arcane Barrage, right? So basically one more hit is between the barrage and the common sense and the ability to flashback the barrage and find bolt or missile, whatever it is, right? Like you pretty much just win. If it hits the second time, it's done. And potentially the answer at this point is like 2 cats or something, right? Or like 2 blockers, and then if I can kill a blocker with, say, a Arcane Barrage, right?
Or even just flashback link and attack to the Oasis, effectively. So you're still getting in the 6 and turning off the cats, like, all of a sudden.
What was that, sorry?
So if his answer is 2 cats, they would have to be in blocking positions, most likely the floodplain.
Yeah.
And if that's his answer, you just blink to the pond and then attack the Oasis.
Yep.
And then the cats are sitting in front of a spider going, oh, well, that's awkward. We can't attack. We can't, like, we can't deal with a reader. We can't like put on any damage. If he plays them both on the square where you are, you just flash back one of the berries and hit the other cat. So there's no real good way for him.
I think if he doesn't kill it, it's game over. It's just game over if he doesn't kill it.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that possibility exists is another reason to just attack, right? So, potentially I've just won the game. And I don't exactly have the best. Like I'm saying, it's important to get this damage in, and there's sort of a path to victory. But between Bruin and whatever, it's not like a automatic win or whatever with the cards that I currently have, right? Like I'm still quite dependent on drawing something else to push me over the finish line. So I don't actually have necessarily what I need to win at the moment, and the prospect that Ritter could just win the game is definitely a factor here. And also, in order to be able to win with the cards that I do have, I had to do this 6 damage. And from this point, like, of course you're just going to attack again next turn if it's still alive.
Yeah.
You're not going to retreat at that point, so...
There's also the fact that he's shown that he can't deal with it cleanly on his last turn.
Well, like, in a way that he wants to. In a way
jam his minion, right? And just hope. So there's a potential that he just doesn't have a clean answer. So if he does have an answer on his next turn, which he does, it's going to cost him a lot, potentially 2 cards, and most of his mana, if not all of it, which happens. So
yeah, I mean, in the end, it basically, if you look at the reality is, right, that it cost my opponent 13 mana and 2 turns. And 3 cards.
Yep. And 6 life.
And 6 life to deal with it. And it cost me, 9 mana and 2 cards.
Yeah.
And sort of 1.5 turns, if you like. Something like that, right? So...
And I was about to say, why would you play the Pebble Pass in the backline there? But you ripped it up.
Yeah. Lag is the reason.
Yep. That'll do it.
Yeah, so the difference now is that, just to sort of go back, because we're talking about not wanting to allow my opponent to attack there, but at this point, it's just a different game state. It's entering the late game. If my opponent deals with the Ritter, he can already attack my Gothic Tower, basically, right? Like, he's already got an avenue to attack. So giving my opponent a second avenue, it doesn't matter that much at this point, pretty much. Like, compared to before.
Interestingly, if you play the Pebble Pass on the other side next to the Gothic Tower, then he still has a very hard time attacking.
Yeah.
Like, then, because basically where you play it now, it gives him an option to play charge minions and attack. Like, if he wanted to attack the Gothic Tower, he could play a charge minion and attack it. Whereas if the path is on the other side, charge minions still can't attack on this board.
Yeah. And I do play it on the other side if if I think that, like, the Atlantean Fate thing, right? Like, at this point I'm thinking, he probably doesn't have it, right? Like, surely he would have used it by now. So, it's like, if I knew that he had it, it's obviously on the other side. But then the other factor now is, I don't know, I've also got common sense now, right? So I can also deal with it. It's just like...
Yeah.
It,
I'm not saying it's bad to put it on that side, by the way. I'm just saying that is... Because even, like, the path on the other side still doesn't stop the...
No, it doesn't stop what he did to kill
that he made. But... Yeah. So the one reason... It's basically for locking out sites on the board, and maybe the paths on the other side is still better because you then wrap his valley and you let him... I'm not sure which is better. Maybe it is better just so that he can't wrap your bridge. But it is obviously way worse into Atlantean Fate.
Yeah, but I got common sense to get this spell, so... as soon as that happened, I just... I know. I remember going through the thinking process thing, I'm umming and ahhing, and then I got common sense, whatever. Put it there, basically. Like, don't want him to wrap the bridge. I was also thinking a lot about Geyser, because at this point I'm like, I'm pretty sure he doesn't have Atlantean Fate, but he's going to be running Geysers in the deck, and... I don't know. It just... I was... I thought about putting it on the other side. I'm really trying to... For some reason, I was just like... It doesn't matter that much. Like, it's okay here.
I don't hate it over there.
Yeah. Because, I mean, the other part of all of this is just when there's really tight decisions like this, like, I don't get to talk to you for half an hour about it. Like,
Yeah.
I get 10 seconds basically to have to go with something. So, and if I'm going to sort of spend, more than 5 or 10 seconds thinking about something, like,
it's probably more important thing about something else.
You have to reserve those instances where you're really going to have a little bit of a think. You have to limit them, right? Like,
yeah, you can't tank every turn for 5 minutes and then IRS all of a sudden come on, play at a reasonable pace sort of thing. Whereas you can, the things that are slightly less important at this point of the game, which, the difference between the path being on the left or the right.
I mean, I'm not sure it's the wrong decision on the left still. I'm thinking about it now. It's like,
I'm not saying it's strictly wrong.
It could be on the right, but it's still not necessarily. Maybe it is in the correct spot. Even if we did talk about it for 3 hours, we would conclude it.
Yeah,
that it is the right spot.
I think both options are correct. Is probably what it comes down to.
All right. So what did I do? I just played the Pebble Path and
played the Pebble Path, attacked, and played Common Sense for Common Sense.
Yeah,
and played
Berry.
Berry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing you could have done that turn is instead of playing the path, you could have played a tower, so that you could potentially flashback or play a Common Sense or something. But overall, I would say tower's better because then you're saving the tower.
So I know why. I know why I did it, by the way. So the reason why I did it is because I wanted my opponent to have to worry about Crateros.
Yep, that's fair.
And I know that, technically if I played a tower, I could still have the other third tower, right? But it's just, it's sending a signal that you don't have it, basically, right? Even though you might still have it, you might have the third tower and you might have the Crateros, but I'm not trying to confuse my opponent here. I'm just trying to send the signal, worry about Crateros. It's a possibility.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
I also think wasting 1 mana on that turn and not playing a Common Sense and stripping one out of your deck is better, so that you can have the option of having a bigger barrage this turn or having a bigger Common Sense chain / target, through Common Senses and blinking and flashing back and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
But realistically, even just you want to set up for 8 mana this turn so that if the attack does land, you can barrage for 8 in Death's Door anyway, because that's 14. So even with literally any other options, I think this is still better, but setting up for the Death's Door.
So this is the power is Shadow Strike, 7 mana.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did he have to draw that site that turn to do it as well?
No, he tapped it last turn.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I'm totally happy with that. I mean, it's weird because I'm sure it feels like Ritter was a failure. I'm sure to some people potentially, but this, from our perspective, this is like really good value out of Ritter. Really good play, really strong, really impactful. Potentially the game does end up pretty close in the end. Potentially it was game winning, right? This Ritter at this moment.
But even if it didn't, even just what it literally did on the board was still good for 1 card and 6 mana. Like, even if it didn't get the Bury and attack and just had the Prowess Shadow Strike, take your whole turn on a pretty important turn, that's a very good value in my opinion.
I draw a spell here, so I could have drawn a sight. Like, I basically know I draw the Dispel, but before I draw that, I thought about it before, and that's why I did it quickly. So, because I know basically my turn, depending at the moment with my current hand, it's just going to be Common Sense to get the remaining 2 Common Senses and to cast 3 Common Senses, and then to grab and to play the tower and to get a Power Flight. Right, I know that that's going to be my turn. But I also know that if I do that, that I've now sent the signal that I don't have the Crateros, basically. Yeah. But, well, sort of that. Not necessarily that I don't have it as such, but that I can't cast it that turn, right? But I figured it's just a 1-turn window, and I actually don't have the Crateros. That's the thing, right? And I kind of need to draw it.
Even if you didn't have Crateros, you wouldn't cast it on this turn board anyway.
No. But I sort of still just don't. I need cards to win the game still. That's the thing.
Oh, I mostly mean you're not signaling that you don't have Craterize, because this isn't a Craterize board anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, understood. So, yeah, I'm just sort of explaining why, like, we're talking about signaling about that, and now we sort of can't potentially, yeah. So it's not mixed signals as such. It's just, yeah. Hopefully, I'm sure it's obvious to you why I drew a spell, right? I don't actually have the cards to win. I need spells. I need to.
Yeah.
I need to start digging, and I need to start digging. Like, if you're looking at this board state now, my opponent
so
is...
the interesting thing I was thinking about is, yeah, you draw a spell, but there's a couple, like, you could... Potentially, you could draw a site so that you don't have to play your tower, so that you could barrage for 7, which sets up for another barrage for 7 next turn, which forces him into flipping for Bruin, and then the game changes into like a new whole complete game state, right? Where you're probably on the back foot, so it was right to do what you're doing. But that's just one line of, like, going for the win straight away. If Bruin wasn't an issue, I think you do go for that. But because you don't have, like, a clean kill on Bruin either, outside of just barraging again and not death dooring, I like the play that you made here, where it's just draw a spell just because you try to draw for action. You can still do what you did, right? Just play the tower. You're not wasting the mana. You're still going up in mana. You're churning through heaps of cards in your deck. And because you drew the Dispel, you don't need to worry about saving a Common Sense either to try and get it later to play around Atlantean Fate. You can just churn through as many cards as you can, fill up your graveyard.
It sets up for the following turn to be, blinks and power flights and stuff next turn as well, to draw even more. So, and I'm also thinking, there's so many things that I could get at this point that would be huge. Like,
it's also your graveyard's getting so big when you make this play on this turn that it doesn't even matter if he draws a side for turn and hits Pyre. It's just going to be one flashback worth of cards. So it's like, it's not going to be anything particular that you like are worried about losing, sort of thing either. So,
but I could hit Feast for Crows, which would be huge, right? Potentially just game winning if I hit that. Yeah. So I could hit Feast for Crows. Obviously, I could hit the...
Pyre,
what's that one,
and
sorry?
then you would name Tice.
Like, yeah, even though he doesn't have it in his deck. But I don't know, maybe I would name Ruler of Thule. Knowing that I could cast it twice in the same turn anyway, and knowing that he does have the Ruler, I would lead with Ruler. And then I would see that he doesn't have the Tice, and then I'd probably just take Atlantean Fate or something. I don't know. Depends. I'd see his hand and make a decision. But I think at this point, if I stripped out the Ruler and the Atlantean Fate, like, basically, I know that Feast for Crows is game winning if I hit it. Craterize is a pretty big deal because you can't really set up for a Ruler, a Thule play, really very well at all anymore. So Craterize would be huge. Nimbus Djinn would be huge. And I also wouldn't be that sad about just
another barrage would be fine.
Another barrage. I wouldn't be sad about getting Ring of Morrigan even. It can ping out the Tawny. It can... not sad. It wouldn't be huge, but
you can hit a Wizard and then you're off to the races.
Yeah, exactly.
You could draw Orb, but then same deal.
A Browse, you're going to hit one of those things to be off the. You get the double Browse. Browse would be huge as well.
Yep.
An Orb, like you're saying, Orb could be huge. Like, there are so many cards at this point that are huge. If you get a Wizard, you're likely to draw into one of the huge cards. And the reality is, if I'm stripping out all these cards with the Common Senses, getting the Power Flight, and then playing the Power Flight and potentially the Blink and drawing this, like, the reality, there's a higher probability that next turn or this turn or next turn I'm going to have one of these cards, right? If I take this line. So I'm thinking of this in terms of I get, this turn or next turn, I'm probably going to end up with a card that puts me into a position to be able to win the game. Basically.
Yeah, for sure.
That I could then cast the turn after. If I, maybe I'll draw it this turn or at the start of next turn, but if not, I'm going to draw it during next turn and then I can win after that. And I'm very much thinking that if he has Tice, he's not good.
Yeah,
he probably wins the game, right? And
yeah, because he can bring your spiders up and then like barrage them basically, and then all of a sudden he's in an amazing spot. Even if you have a good Tice and like destroy his hand a little bit, what he did to you would have been like.
So I'm really worried about that. I'm also just acutely aware that you know, he's got a lot of cards that he's saved up at this point. Like,
yeah.
And I'm counting out like at 8 mana, you know, he's probably got the ruler, and then if he also has Boudica to put down on the same turn with it, he does not need much at all on the board.
No.
If those two come down in the same turn. And
Yeah,
I'm kind of aware of the fact that I don't have 6 turns to win here. Like, he's going to kill me in the next 6 turns. He's going to kill me in the next 5 turns. He's probably going to kill me in the next 3 turns or 2 turns. So, like, there's a real urgency. I feel like there's a real urgency that I have to win the game in the next few turns.
And especially with that in mind, with the way he burnt the fire breathing earlier, you assume that he's got a way to kill you when you're on death's door as well.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'd be thinking, like, maybe I could buy myself a couple of extra turns by sitting on bedrock with a spider under you, right? Because no minion can kill you in that situation. So you're like, all right, the druid has to come in and kill me. Or
how much would have you rather that fire breathing was a lava flow in this game as well?
Yep.
Would have just...
You probably would have. He probably wins this game in that case.
Yep.
Which is something we've been on for quite a while.
Yeah, I think part of it is just we think root spiders are exceptionally good. They just seem to... I'm not saying that other people don't think they're good, but we value them like at like top tier.
They hard won you this game.
Yeah, like we value them like if you're
top 5 cards in the game, easy.
Yeah, sort of like if we're playing... We even sometimes putting him in a deck that's running its own water sites, for example. Like... it's not great, but we try it, right? Like, pretty much, if we have a site that's got earth and doesn't have water, it's
always tried for sure. Yeah. Sometimes sometimes there's better options, but
because of that premium that we place on it, our sort of decks that we build, that we're constantly testing each other, like there's just so many times that it ends up fighting root spiders over and over and over again, and we sort of end up naturally having cards fit into the decks that help deal with them pretty much. So that's there's all sorts of little bits that like Lava Flow and other cards that we just always sort of thinking about, basically.
Yeah, like guys are in Atlantean Fate, and the fact that we have bedrocks in this deck, that's
well, that's exactly why they're in there.
Right?
Yep. It's exactly why they're in there, is because we know that Atlantean Fate is such a problematic card, and water is so popular, and it's obviously going to be in every single water deck. And you do not want to have a deck that just says, well, I'll just hope that they don't draw Atlantean Fate or I lose. Like, you want to build your deck so that it can still win into it. So,
like Atlantean Fate, the big reason why we added lookouts originally, and they ended up being incredible, but that's the main reason we tried them out to start with.
I mean, probably the best 2 cards that the Firewater Druid has in this matchup is Atlantean Fate and Ruler of Thor. And
I'd say Tice is better than... Like, Courtesan is better than
Courtesan,
both.
Sure, yeah. But that's
three
not...
They're all on the same tier of, like, game-winningly strong.
Yeah. I think the difference with the Courtesan, though, is that it's not in every deck. Whereas the other 2 are.
Yeah, it's more of like a personal preference, and sometimes someone will have like a really bad experience with it, so they're just not willing to play it anymore, sort of thing. Whereas that never really happens with Fate and Tool.
No, I mean, Courtesan Tires is just one of those cards that when we talk
about this, I'll admit, I hated Courtesan for such a long time, but it's it's a necessary evil, I think, at this point.
But it's we talk about this. It's a really low floor, really high ceiling card, right? Like, it'll be amazing and it'll just win the game all by itself sometimes, and other times it would just be a completely useless, completely dead card that does worse than nothing the whole game, basically, right? It's whereas like Atlantean Fate and Ruler of Thor, their worst case scenario is not that bad. Like, they're like really high floor, high ceiling cards, basically, which is why they're an auto include and why the Courtesan is optional.
Yeah.
So I did exactly that turn that we talked about, and then I drew a Power Flight. So now I'm thinking next turn it's like draw a spell, and I can basically go Power Flight, draw a sight, and... Sorry, you're going to draw a spell, and flashback a bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to play power two. I'm going to draw 3 cards, depending on what I draw. I'm thinking, right? But obviously my opponent hasn't had their turn yet, so I don't have to do my turn yet. I think this is the turn that my opponent is like, I think does he flip this turn?
I think it's flip and 2 cats. 1 cat on the back line, 1 cat on the floodplain in the corner.
Yeah, 1 on the Oasis and floodplain.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think probably he should have just put him on the floodplain and the pond on the other edge.
Yeah, the 2 corners, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Because where he put them, I can't actually craterize him. So he would know that. Because I can't... I don't have any sites, right? So I can't play a site and discard a site. So I can't actually craterize him this turn. So that might be why he did it.
That's another reason why he could potentially just play both cats on the pond and flip for Bruin. Anyway. Because you can't craterize this turn, he doesn't have to worry about it and then set up for... attack with 2 cats, ruler, and druid and tawny, which still not. So that's 10, 12, 14. It's pretty 17 with the ruler. So all you need is like any other charge minion, and you're like threatening death's door. So it's all like any burn spell effectively. Which, clearly he must not have had, because otherwise he probably would have just gone for that. Or maybe he wasn't thinking about you not having a sight in hand and just was playing around. Because my read was it looked like he was playing around Craterize, not thinking about the fact that you couldn't cast it next turn.
Yeah, that's possible.
The way he the way he flips. Flip is a good indicator that he's probably worried about Craterize so that he doesn't take 10.
Yeah, especially when the Bruin can't attack anyway.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Even with the ruler, so... Yeah, that's possible as well. Oh, yeah, so another cat comes down...
Yeah, on the Oasis.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Just going to speed it up a bit, because... I think he's thinking a bit, which makes me think he's got options and.
So basically, if he didn't play the cat first, I think he was going to play the an Infernal Legion. But he probably played the cat and then went, "Oh, I should have thought about my whole turn." That's what it looked like anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. That might make. Yeah,
maybe he even thought he had 8 mana and he was going to play Fate and a cat or something. But then he went, played 3 and went, whoops. Maybe that was something that happened as well. But who knows?
So I think I just draw a spell because of. So again, so this is how you should play your turn out, right? So do this every time. So before you draw, you work out what you would do and how. Then you start to, with what you have in your hand, and then you start to reverse, start to think about what you should draw, and then you draw it, and then you see how that might change your turn, and then you play it out one step at a time with stuff that changes information and things like that. So, I'm thinking, I'm going to barrage and kill. My worst sort of case turn, if you like, is to barrage and kill the Bruin, and to ping I want to ping the Druid for 1, and before I do that, I'll play Power Flight, see if it changes my turn, right? So I'm going to do a 5-point barrage, and Power Flight is basically my turn. That's what I'm thinking. And then it's like, well, what site could I draw that's going to change that? And then you're thinking, and what spell could you draw? So what site could I draw? Basically, none that's going to change that.
Yeah, so interesting with the way that you ended up ginning him out, drawing a site here so that you could ping for 2 would have actually been very relevant if it wasn't for the fact you had so many cards in hand. Because it was like putting.
But I do have so many cards in hand. But
yeah.
So I was thinking the 1 damage. So 1, if I got the Jin, I know I was all good anyway. Like it doesn't matter. Yeah. Like I've easily got enough cards. And if I was thinking the 1 damage is really relevant because of Craterize, right? Because at 13 I can bolt or Magic Missiles for the 3 and Craterize for the 10.
Yeah.
So That's why I was thinking.
Yeah, I was also thinking there's a world where, because you can also, instead of drawing a spell, you can draw a sight, play the sight, barrage for 4, and then use 2 card draw cards, but which lets you get a sight forward, but also stops you from tapping and drawing a sight. So you end up 1 card down. So the way you're doing it is like more raw cards seen versus developing this turn, which I think is completely fine.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to develop into at the moment. That's the...
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one thing it does let you do... No, even if you do draw Crater Eyes, you can still do it because you were drawing a sight this turn. Then you can just draw a sight manually for your turn. So yeah, that doesn't even change things.
So interestingly, it kind of doesn't really... It just reinforces the plan in a way because I've drawn the Lightning Bolt, right? Yeah. So it makes it even more important to do that 1 damage. So do the Power of Flight first, importantly, before the 5-point barrage, just in case what I draw off the Power of Flight changes the turn. It seems sort of obvious, but we've seen enough games where somebody will like draw a spell for turn, play out their whole turn, and then tap and draw a card with their sorcerer at the end of their turn, and then pass.
Oh yeah, there's also that.
Like that happens all the time. So, yeah.
Not now, games.
Yeah. Yep. So I've drawn the blink, and now.
So now, interestingly, you could actually, if you didn't draw the lightning bolt, you could have blinked, gone down to 3, drawn a sight, played a sight, and then barrage for 4 to clear up. But with the sight that you drew, you definitely wouldn't have wanted to do that, so that worked out. And the fact that you drew the lightning bolt to pair with the Crater Eyes later makes the 5-point barrage just the good option anyway.
Just double... Well, I locked my computer. I think it's still recording the thing. So that wouldn't have... I don't know what you saw in that, but...
Yeah, I saw you. You might want to check to make sure it's recording, just in case.
Yeah, it is. So
yeah, good. So... Interestingly,
so what happened there? I did the 5-point barrage. So what I did there, I was just
5-point barrage, and then you moved your spiders. This is
So I'll go back to the. So I was just checking the Bruin just to double check that the card worked how I thought it worked before I did it. That's why I was. Yeah. I knew that was the plan, but I was I was reading the card before I did it. That's why I stalled a bit. So basically, I know now that if with these 2 cats, right, he's been stocking all this stuff. So I'm like, if he has Boudica and Ruler, he draws a sight, plays it, wins the game. If I don't do this.
Yeah.
If I do this, he can Geyser to kill the Root Spider, but then he can't Ruler and Boudica. He easily has enough damage.
Yeah, I'm trying to count up if Ruler and Boudica is enough on the front if he hits front slats. So it's no, it wouldn't be enough.
I added it all up beforehand, so it's not. Yeah, so I was like, if I do this. He cannot Deathstorm me this turn as far as every card I could conceivably think of. If I don't do this, he can. Now, does he necessarily have the cards? Don't know.
It's 2 points short for Ruler Boudica if he hits front sights.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense why you did that.
So that's why.
Yep.
Basically. Now, was it worth taking the risk? Maybe. But I didn't feel so. Like I felt like I don't care if he hits me for 18. I got 3 Divine Healings or whatever, right? Like 2 in hand. I can go all the way back. The most important thing now is just do not get hit for 20 in 1 turn. Like,
just don't get Dusted this turn and you're probably in a fine spot, right?
So that's why. It's that simple. It's just... He probably doesn't have the Boudica or what. Like, he probably doesn't have those exact cards, but they're clearly both in the deck. He clearly already has the Ruler. There's every possibility that he might have the Boudica, right? Like...
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm just playing it safe. That's it. Like, it's...
Yeah, so this is the turn that I was talking about earlier, where this is like the most crazy Atlantean Fate turn, right? Even though it's obviously going away next turn with a common sense for a Dispel if you don't already have it, which, but in his mind, he's thinking you probably have the common sense for it. So that's still 3 cards out of the graveyard and 4 mana for the turn. So if he plays it this turn, he gets to kill the spider and then still attack with the cat onto a water site, which then forces 3 cards out of your graveyard and 4 mana to get rid of their fate, which would then cause another 3 cards out of the graveyard for the bury. And then all of a sudden, most of the graveyard's gone. You're in a bit of an awkward spot now, unless you already have the cards to kill. And the fact that he doesn't play it this turn, I thought was a massive problem, because you can also still get in for 20 damage onto the bedrock.
Yeah. And this is where I was still a little bit like, I don't know what he was like, playing psychological mind games with me, because I was like, he doesn't have the fate. He does have the fate. I can show you the exact moment. It's to do with those 20 movements, because he moves the 20 out of the way and like, he's going to Atlantean Fate. And then he attacks with a cat, and I'm like, huh? And then he ends up attacking back with the 20, and I'm like, I don't know. He's like, I think he's trying to like, you know, he doesn't have the fate, but he's constantly like really, you know, he's doing a really good job tricking me into thinking that he does have it, basically. Because the whole game I was like, I kept feeling like he had Atlantean Fate, but it kept never coming.
He never played it when it would have been good, and just skipped 5 mana turns like 3 turns in a row.
Yeah, so it was just like super big mixed signals all the time. It's just like the whole game. So, but at this point, I was like, I have the dispel, right? So,
yeah,
as well. But like I said, like it's really just the case of I sort of worked it all out as much as I could in the little amount of time that you have. That if I do this move, he can't Death Storm me this turn. And
yeah. I think knowing going into this turn that you're sacrificing a spider for the just the mana cost, right? Like even if it's Geyser, you can't get Death Door. If it has to be Fate, you can't even play Ruler, so you just know that there's no chance of Death Door this turn. I think that's fine. I'm pretty happy with that. But obviously, to the untrained eye, it looks like you're just throwing away a spider for no reason, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I can.
Whereas, like, for the whole game, you've been so disciplined to not do that.
Yeah, but the difference is the whole game he couldn't Death Storm me in one turn. Like, this was the first time that he could,
exactly.
right? That's what changed.
For sure.
So, and again, it was always going to be a matter of time that the possibility of 20 damage in one turn would arrive, right? Like, eventually I have to play the sights down. And this is a big part of that beginning of the game, right? Like, not playing the sights, stalling that out, giving myself the biggest possible opportunity to draw as many cards as I possibly can to hopefully get to a win condition that I still kind of haven't got to yet, right?
Yep.
We can have a bit of an interesting... Because it's unclear. I was sort of looking at it a bit and thinking about it a bit. Like, it was not entirely clear to me that if my opponent would have definitely Death Stormed me the following turn or not.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that at the end after we see the rest of the information before we have to have that conversation.
What does he do with his other 2 mana this time? Because I remember he plays Legion, but he could have Geysered your Spider. What does he do with the other 2?
So he
surely just if
that was his changing his mind there to attack with the 20 instead.
But I mean, surely if your plan is to play Legion, wouldn't you just start your turn off by killing the spider and drawing a card?
Yeah, if he had the Geyser, which I think Ira was saying he did, right?
He does, yeah. He's had the Geyser. He's had the Geyser, the Fate, the Fool since the start of the game, because Ira was commenting on it like quite a few times.
Yeah. So at this point, I'm assuming he does. Like again, he doesn't have Atlantean Fate. He doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't have the Geyser. I'm 100% sure he doesn't have Geyser, even though he does. And that 20 movement back and forth, and the cat and whatever. I'm like, when he moved the 20 out the way, I was sure he was going to play the Geyser. Sorry, the Atlantean Fate.
Yeah.
And then he's attacked, and then I'm like, he doesn't. And then he's moved it back. So at this point, I feel like he may. I still don't know, right, about the fate, but I'm like, he doesn't have a geyser. And I draw the Nimbus Djinn, and I'm breathe a massive sigh of relief right now because I'm thinking he's death storing me next turn. I don't know if I'm right about that, but I feel like he was going to death storm me. We can have a chat about that after, but right now I'm just like, phew, I win basically. Pretty much.
I'm just trying to think if there's a way you don't get death stored next turn with the current board state, with things you could do. Because Ira was talking about the fact that he probably didn't think you were going to divine healing for 3, and I just had a bit of a giggle immediately. I'm like, absolutely, we divine healing for 3. Not that it ended up mattering, but I just that was a little funny moment I had because we often talk about how a lot of people always try and get maximum value out of the healings, whereas we're generally pretty proactive about just burning them, just to make sure you don't get one shot out of nowhere. And the difference between 3 life quite often matters. Like if that last turn, like, you know, you would have, if you were on 18, you would have been death stored, whereas the fact that you're on 20, you can't. So, and we quite often consider that when just trying to thinking about burning divine healings.
There's a bit of confusion here because I said I play Merlin's Tower and then I play. I say I'll play Nimbus Djinn, and they're like, you can't use the discount for Nimbus Djinn. I'm like, I'm not using it for the. I'm not using the discount for that. I'll hold your horses. I'm going to use the Archimago is casting it, and it's costing me 6 mana. So, yeah. Then I'm sort of just explaining that I'm flashing it back from the cemetery with my avatar using my remaining 2 mana at this point. Like, I'm being really clear about what's happening because there's some confusion just generally, right? But conceptually, it's like I have 8 mana. I'm playing a Nimbus Djinn and a Blink with the 8 mana, and then the Merlin's Tower is casting the Blink from my hand because it can't use the flashback ability from the cemetery. To cast it from the cemetery.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I think it can.
You're wrong. It definitely can.
Maybe it's Merlin's Tower in particular is changing.
It's not Merlin's Tower. It's just the Archimago ability. You can't. Other spellcasters can't use it. So it's the same as Death Speaker.
It's not the same. It's different. It's not the same as Death Speaker. There was a rules change a while when I can't remember when, but it was basically because Death Speaker used to be able to do it, and then Archimago came out, and Spark Mage with Merlin came out, and that's when they changed it so that all of the other ones didn't work, but Archimago is worded differently and still works. Unless they've made another.
No, they've changed it. It doesn't. They made another change. It doesn't.
Oh, okay.
Just it's It's they made so it doesn't. But yeah. So I was just making sure when I did this that it's clear what's what basically.
Fair.
So, but there is a thing. I don't want to get too much into the whole why everything's there, but just every time I win with Nimbus Djinn so often, every time it happens, it's just like everybody feels like this card should not be in this deck, and it maybe other Archimago decks it shouldn't be, but in our one it absolutely should be. It is so good, it is so strong. Even if I draw Crater Eyes in this position, there's a chance I'll still lose, right?
Yeah.
The only card in my deck that just wins the game is the Nimbus Djinn.
Yeah.
The only guaranteed win. The only card that I could have drew that turn that was a guaranteed win was the exact card that I drew to win that turn, I mean. So, and then importantly, it's because you get to double blink. If you have 1 blink in hand and 10 mana, you get to double blink. And you can get it on top of them no matter where they are on the board, pretty much. And draw 2 cards in the process to be able to discard to it. So it's
not even pretty much. There is no spot on the board they can be that they can't get away, that they can get away from a double blink.
No, it's just, they literally can't unless it's like they've got a Root Spider under them or it's a Gnome Hollows or something, right? So, that's what I meant. Sorry, like, I should have mentioned before on the placements as well. The Merlin's Tower is where it is, so that they can't Ruler of Thor attack from the River of Flame.
Yep, I assume that when you played it there.
Yep, I'm sure you did, but I'm just
Yeah, no,
just pointing it out that every site is put down in a specific place in a specific order. Like, it's all for a reason, kind of thing. And you should just pointing that out, because this is how you should be. You know, it's probably the best single tip, I reckon, to get better at the game is site placements.
I think Ira even made a comment about where it was, but not so much about where you would place it, but more if it was in front of the river, it would have been in a massive different story sort of thing. Like, you would have been in trouble or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember thinking he made a comment about it.
This game, I'm 100. Well, I'm not 100%, but I'm fairly certain was just won or lost, depending on how you look at it. Just because of the site placements, there were some other bits here. The not playing the Atlantic Fate and stuff was a bit.
It was won on turn 4, basically. His turn 4 when he played the Valley in the wrong spot. I think there was definitely some turns he could have played the Atlantic Fate that would have caused you some hiccups and potentially changed. But overall, I don't think it would have changed the way the game played out too much. But it was still better than not playing it for the whole game, like he ended up doing.
In fairness, I think to him, I can see that. Like, he did say at the end, like I heard him say he acknowledged that he probably should have played it. But I think, in fairness to him, that especially if he's played against other Archimago decks, right? Like, that card would just get amazing value typically, right?
Yeah.
You shut off 4 sites, 4 thresholds, you know, kill 1 or 2 routes. Like, it's potentially game winning every time. So he's probably used to that. And
for sure. But I do think when you see 2 bedrocks on the other side, that you probably just have to eat it a bit and take the value that you can get, as opposed to trying to get maximum value.
Don't play bedrock as well, right? So
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's just part of it, right? You're just not used to, like you said, you have to just bite the bullet and take what little bit of value you can get, and you're probably just not used to having to do that.
Like, there's certainly, if he'd had things to do outside of just like passing and not playing Fate, I can see doing those for sure. That I'm way down for that. But when it's just pass and do nothing, when you can potentially just cripple your opponent, because either you either have to, especially when the windmill was there as well, like you're completely taking you off of air threshold and things like that. It gets a little bit awkward.
I don't have 3 air threshold, right? If he has the Fate there. I mean, yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, you would have had to. Yeah, but it would cost you so many cards and card draw effectively to get out from under it, which you need to do.
But I think that's part of the. I think that's the bit that was missing from the equation. That you were saying bite the bullet and so on, and I think that's all right. But I think the bit it's not entirely just biting the bullet. It's also conceptualizing it from the perspective that, I mean, not so much, it's less of a deal later in the game, but earlier on, right, when I just had the windmill and the pebble paths, and I had no answer, right? I didn't have the common sense for many turns, right? So you're just creating a problem for me, and maybe I can deal with it, maybe I can't, but even if I can,
it still costs you resources.
I have to spend my turn doing that, right? I have to do things that you're forcing me to do that I don't necessarily want to do. And like you're saying, consume. So 1, you're consuming resources, and 2, I don't have the luxury of just being able to dig for what I need to find. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's costing me resources, and it's inadvertently costing me time because I'm spending my turn and my resources doing something that I don't want to do, right? Instead of just doing things like casting a blink or whatever to draw a card, or tapping and drawing a side instead of having to put sites on the board, right? So it's like a form of pressure, basically, right? In the same way as playing the sites to encroach my side of the board to potentially stage an attack, like putting a minion on the board that could potentially hit me, that if I don't kill it, I'm going to start losing life. That's pressure. But also the Atlantean Fate it's a form of pressure, right? It's
a different vector of pressure, basically. It's pressuring your mana.
And there's definitely just a resource efficiency thing. And this was it was pretty evident in this game, but it was even more evident in your final. Was it the annual one, the 2024 one? Like, I think if you add up between this game and your final, I don't know what the number is, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was something like 100 unused mana between the 2 games from our opponents.
Yeah, I could see that.
Something I might be exaggerating a bit, but it'll be a phenomenally big number of unused mana, right? And then if you add up for our decks, right, it would be a small percentage of that amount. Because we're typically looking to use all the mana every turn, or nearly all, right? Like we're looking to, like there's an efficiency aspect to this game as well, right?
Absolutely. Which is why we play so many more cantrips in general.
Yeah, because I mean, I was speaking to Ira a bit after the game. We went through a lot of points, but he was questioning why Power Flight is in the deck, and he's saying is like you're paying 2 mana to basically get a third of a card, right, on the flashback, and it's like there's a lot more to it than that, right? But it's also you're only paying 2 mana if you were going to spend the mana on something else, right? If you were just going to do nothing and pass, it doesn't cost you 2 mana, right? And that's the singular biggest point to wrap your head around, in that it only costing you 2 mana if you would have done something else with it. If you weren't going to do anything with it, it's free, yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest and that's the biggest singular point to wrap your head around the inclusion of that card. There's more points than that, just that one, but that's the singular biggest one. And there's other points, like for example, just there are important cards like Nimbustion, for example, to win the game that you want to draw, like Crater Eyes, like Feast for Crows, and if you play more cantrips, you just increase your chances of drawing those important cards faster.
Yeah. It's like how everyone has a big problem with Archmage and Divine Healing. Well, this version just has more chances to get to Divine Healing. Like, that's because you have so much more cantrips. It's just, you're drawing your more important cards more often. And you're drawing your sweepers more often, so you need less of them also.
And I would just like to point out that I had 2 dead cards the whole game that I never played. 2 Divine Healings that were completely not needed.
Yeah. And the Earthquake.
Yep. Yeah, so there you go, my starting hand, right? Starting hand is my finishing hand. Yeah, obviously, it's like I didn't actually use them, though, but in all seriousness, it did change the way that I played, right? Like,
yeah,
it impacted my decision-making through the whole game, knowing that
I
had
if you
those
didn't
cards.
have them, there's a good chance you weren't tapping to draw sites as much.
So
you might have had to have
drawn
more
it was in jest a little bit, but I think the point, there is also a fundamental point there that it's, part of the other reason why they weren't needed is because my opponent was, despite a lot of what we're saying, it's like, in principle, the overall approach of having the attitude of there's not much of trying to Death Storm me in a single turn. In principle, and to try to play around things like Crater Eyes, in principle, that's all correct. Like, I
mean, realistically, he was 1 turn away from that, and the way he played out his sites cost him 1 turn. So, if you played his sites differently, there's a potential that he just Death Doors you the turn before you Death Door him, and then can lethal you with some card in his hand, right?
But I believe so in the end. I didn't know the cards for sure, and I think he does put at the end of the game he shows a bit, but we talk about it a bit. But my takeaway is that the reason why we're pointing out all of this stuff, it's basically to point out that if these couple things were different, I'm pretty sure I lose the game.
Well, with the way the board state is, if he doesn't attack this turn, like, because he can't one-shot you, and can one-shot you on the next turn, if you didn't have him on Death's Door, you probably do lose this game, because he can just one-shot you. And you couldn't really get his stuff off the board in, like...
Obviously, if I don't have the Djinn, I'm doing something else with all these cards, right? And I think that turn is something like...
Because all of his minions were 4 power, it was very hard to get anything off the board in a clean state. They're all on water, they're all 4 power, because it costs you 4 to kill the Legion. So to kill the cat and a tawny, it's 5 mana for a barrage, and you'd have to move, and then you'd have to play the Merlin's Tower, so you can't step. You'd have to blink. That's what 11 mana
8.
with -2. So you wouldn't even have the mana for it.
Well, it could go, yeah. The Brute Spider could just step up, obviously, because he doesn't have the Geyser, right? Because he already would have used it if he had it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. Theoretically. Which then he would have had, and then you would have been Death Lord. But no, so all of his stuff wouldn't have been where it is, right?
Yeah, but
so you wouldn't have been able. You would have.
I'm gonna have to back up. I can't remember everything properly. Sorry, I'm gonna have to back up now.
Okay. So the cat would have been on
so
the.
So what happens now is by the way, the game just ends. I'm just gonna move and barrage him when he's on death's door from my cemetery. So it's game over.
Yeah.
I think on that last turn, the only hope my opponent had was to draw a Funeral Pyre and to play it. But I think there's no chance because there's just too many cards in the cemetery for him to be able to get rid of everything. So I think there was literally no way out. So I think this is... No, it's not before I play the Djinn. It's not before I play the Djinn. Right, so it's here, right? So...
No. So what I'm saying is you need to go back even further because on his turn he just doesn't attack, right, with the cat and things like that. He just sets up on water sites to go for a one shot, right, instead of chipping away. And then the cat would be back on the floodplain. You would double bolt the Infernal Legion, so that's 4 of your mana.
Back on the floodplain. I'm not sure what you mean. Sorry. Like this is the turn. If I don't draw the Nimbus Djinn, I can't Death Door him, so I'm going to do something else this turn.
Yeah. So on his turn before this one.
Oh, you want to change his turn now as well?
Yeah, that's. I'm going down like a completely different path, basically, of how the one shot, like, because we were talking about how you would have been in an awkward spot if you didn't Death Door him to try and clear up his board, right? So I suppose we can just So he would have done these attacks anyway, but I mean, like so it would have been easy to clear it up.
So I could have killed.
Yeah, because the cat wasn't on water, you would have just borrowed it anyway, and then you would have been in a fine spot. So.
Like I can just Earthquake and Barrage, right? Or not? No. 3, 4, no. 8, 5, 3.
Yeah, because you can...
1 mana short, right? So Barrage the Legion and Earthquake.
Yeah. So you Earthquake over here from the tower, and then you have 6 mana left, and then you go Bolt. And then, Yeah. And then you're probably in Divine Healing to go back up to 20.
Yeah. And then
although if you've only got a cat in play, you might not.
And then potentially he could still Death Storm me, but I don't know what he has. But the thing is that this Valley of the Light placement, it was more than 1 turn as well. I'm pretty sure it was multiple.
Yeah, so I was saying so if it was minimum 1 turn, but if he'd instead of tap drawing sites and was just drawing sites and playing, it would have been 1 turn. But the way he played it there and then went tap draw, it basically minimum 2 and then another tap draw after he'd tap play, and then he went tap play, tap draw. It was effectively 3 turns potentially, but minimum 1 turn. So.
Yeah.
Which was all you needed, effectively, was that 1 turn difference. So, yeah. But yeah, Djinn. So incredible in this deck.
Yeah, and I've just given up. Like, it's... I feel... I don't think it can be conveyed with words. I think it needs to be conveyed by illustrations. Like this one, like in this game.
Yeah.
To sort of convey it properly. It also won single-handedly, may I add, 2 of my... Like, just in this... I don't know if single-handedly is the word, right? Because it didn't technically single-handedly win the game, right? Like, I had to do a whole entire game to get to the point where it could win by itself at the end. But but effectively, it, like, let's say it was decisive in victory, something like that. And
it was MVP for me last season when I played... like top 4, top 8, all of those matches. It was just absolutely crucial for my wins.
Yeah, I won 2 of the other. Like there was 5. Is it 5 games? 32, top 32, top 16,
top 8, top 4, top
8,
2. Yeah,
top 4, top 2.
Yeah,
5. Yeah, it is 5.
Yeah, last season was 7 rounds.
3 of those 5, it was decisive.
Djinn.
Yeah,
yeah,
it was a decisive.
Yeah, because even so, the big thing I think is why it's good in like this deck as opposed to other decks that can't get it on top easily is you don't have to play cards like Summoning Sphere and stuff, which are like mediocre to bad without the Djinn, whereas you still just get to play your regular cards like Blink and things like that, and then still like the one-off flanking maneuver for even more movement sort of thing. And then you have the games where you have to play it in a situation where it's not optimal for like a one shot on your opponent, but it can still just control the board very like without too much punish. So even in the scenarios where it's like the worst it can be, it's still not bad. It's just not like great. But more often than almost always, it's just so incredible for closing out games and being able to death door your opponent in like, especially in the Archimago mirror. Like that's the reason why we brought it in originally, because it's just being able to close out games is so important, and the fact that you can play around all of the healing cards up by getting off your one shot, and it's like, you know, it's just a one-off card in the deck. It's very important. And it's also, we tried it out because of timed tournaments, and just wanting a way to win faster in those is also very important.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very flexible. It's one of I mean, God, to talk forever about it, but there is fundamental differences, like you're saying. You don't need the summoning sphere. It's also not, if the way we talk about it like it's the primary win condition, but it's not, right? It's a secondary win condition. It's just like an extra way that you can win, and I think
if there were sideboards, it would be a sideboard card for other control matchups, and probably Druid. Like, it's actually been surprisingly good against closing out against Druids, where because they generally want to try and get onto your side of the board as well, just to get around the Craterizers and things like that. That's another reason why the card is better in Archmage, because quite often you don't need 2 blinks because your opponent's been moving up for getting around Craterize or quite moving out of the way of Rise.
Because they're already on your half of the board.
Some games you only need 1. And the games where you only need 1, it's actually very easy to get a one-shot off. Because, you know, a lot of decks, they don't run any healing. And against any of those, all the chip damage is really significant. And then, you know, it's very easy to do 5 cards with a Djinn. Sometimes it's a bit hard to do 7, but 5 is very manageable.
But it's also...
Especially if you back a blink from your graveyard.
There's also just a whole thread on, like, just as a concept, I think we look for cards that have multi-use, that are versatile, right? And also as a deck, as a concept, it's just the more things that you have, like the more ways that you can win, and the more, let's say, things that your opponent potentially has to play around, it feels like it would make the deck less consistent, but just the nature of the game, it actually makes it more consistent if you're not a one-trick pony, basically.
Yeah.
And
that was another reason for Crows as well, right? It's like another win.
Exactly. So
Crows.
It's like that was a big reason for its initial inclusion, but just broadly, it's just in this particular deck, it's just a very versatile card. There are games where you know, they just have a whatever. Let's say in this game, a Red Prowries or something was there, it hits you, and you're on the back foot, and you can just play an Nimbus Djinn on top, discard a card, kill it, force them to, you know, use their turn up to kill it, kind of thing. So it then ends up playing a bit of a role that's a bit more like what sort of Ritter did, let's say, this game. And it's not ideal, but in a pinch, like you said, you can just do it, right? Because it's not like other decks that run Nimbus Djinn. If you do that, you've just thrown your win condition away, right? You can't win anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas in this deck, like you still got other paths to win. You know, you're fine to throw the Nimbus Djinn under the bus, let's say, to buy yourself a turn or 2.
Yeah, because you still have the button for win conditions.
And also just the idea of discarding the cards to it obviously is not quite as bad because of Archimago, because of the ability as well. So you get some extra value there. So anyway, it's we have a 12-hour discussion that I've recorded talking about all the cards in this deck.
That may come out at some point.
That I felt like I couldn't release 12 hours of unedited audio of us speaking, and yeah, unsurprisingly, I haven't. Well, it takes a long time to edit 12 hours of audio, basically. So maybe I'll get there. Maybe it'll happen.
We recorded that not long after the finals of the last season.
Did we do that? Did we do a commentary on that one? Did we?
No. It was just we did that like.
When we did it, yeah, we recorded it in February. after you won the finals last season. So part of the reason I hadn't edited it is just time, because I've been really busy, and it take forever to do that. And the other part of the reason is because I ended up, not wanting to do it yet because I was playing in the Top Cup. So I was sort of wanting to wait until I wasn't in it anymore. So, but yeah, I think that one, it might just be the case of I'll edit enough to get, a first bit out, and then if there's any interest, I'll just progressively release more bits maybe of it, something like that. But I think we've basically it sounds like a long time, but effectively we've condensed like over 1,000 hours of, like, let's say, study and research into a 12-hour conversation, really, right? So it's a lot of information, basically, and a lot of understanding of concepts and cards, and the way that some kind of insight into how we conceptualize and think about the game, let's say. And maybe it's interesting, I'm not sure. Like, it's hard to say.
Interesting to us, at least.
Yeah, interesting to us, but I think, I don't know, like, it's, look at this game here. Absolutely, this game was there to be won by either player, let's say. Like, it could have gone either way, for sure, right? I think we've laid out pretty clearly. It was possible that my opponent could have won this. It's obviously also possible that I could have won it. And the reality is, if you're talking about the vast majority of games we ever play, in testing whatever decks against one another, it almost doesn't matter how favourable or unfavourable the matchup is. If you have one deck playing optimally and the other deck making a whole bunch of mistakes, the deck playing optimally will win some massive percentage of the time, basically, right? Even if it's a really bad matchup for it. And I think there's a really big focus in, like, the matchups and cards and this and that, and fair enough, because all those things matter. But we focus on all those things as well. But the other thing we really focus on is the thing that's actually more important than all of those things, which is just not making mistakes, not doing suboptimal plays, and always trying to we're always trying to get better, right? We're always trying to improve. That's the thing, and we're always pushing each other. We're really good as a team, I think, because we
definitely both think about the game very differently. I think.
We think about the game very differently. We and we never agree to disagree. This is a key point, right? Like, we will not see eye to eye on something, and we won't leave it. It won't let it be. Yeah. We also don't die on a hill about it. We don't argue. We just try to see each other's perspective, and we could talk about it for hours and not not agree, but we'll both go away. We'll both think about it, right? We'll come back, and it's really important that we can reconcile our understanding together and answer the question. It
certainly makes us both better at the game, for sure.
So I think it's just, and that exercise of basically, like, having a disagreement with someone, because that's effectively what we're doing, right? Like, we're having a disagreement, but we find a way to meaningfully reconcile that, to both move forwards and both improve as players. We don't ever let anything lie unanswered, basically. And the only reason, and very occasionally that might happen, and it's not because, and we don't, it's just because we literally could not reconcile it, right? It's not through lack of trying, let's say.
Yeah.
So there are some things that are just so, it's an incredibly complicated game with a lot of depth, and even though we reconcile thoughts, let's say, and we get on the same wavelength, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're right. And we also, we're always, like you're saying with Courtesan, right? Like, it's a card. I know you hated it for ages and you would never play it, but in the end,
I mean,
like
I still hate it, to be fair, but I'm willing to play it now.
Yeah, willing to play it, right? So in the end, it's just you've got to. I think it's just the primary driver for us is to just try to understand things better and to always get better at the game. And
I suppose an important distinction between me just not liking it is I never thought it was like a bad card. I just hated the effect, right? Like it was just I just not a me card effectively.
Yeah, sure. It was just an example though, right? Like the point is that there are plenty of things that we've changed our mind on over time, right? We'll never die on a hill over anything. So
yeah, for sure.
I think it's just So I think it's just it's a pretty important point, I think, somehow, because I don't think I just don't think that other people broadly really have the benefit that we have in that, each other, let's say, right? Like they don't have that person that will push them that hard, right? And that they're
or even if they do have that person, they just don't, they're not like, they don't see the game differently. Like they might see the game, they might have that person, but they both see the game in very similar ways. So there isn't that like friction to.
Yeah, and that's like, the natural thing that people gravitate
from the other side.
Yeah, people are naturally going to gravitate right to people that they see things similarly with as well. Like it's just sort of natural. So, like we really, I guess, I don't know, lucky in that regard. I'm not really sure what it is, but it's just, I think it's just an important point in that. Just really trying to highlight, like we talk about a lot of these things, but it's these things we talk about them like they're glaringly obvious. They're only glaringly obvious after we talked about it for hundreds of hours together, and played thousands of games. They're not glaringly obvious at all without that benefit, right? Without that experience of having gone through that, but also of us not having agreed on all of these things and having to have talked it all out. That's all I'm really trying to say. So I'm just trying to put some perspective, because I know we went through this game and we're kind of pointing out all of these things like they're supposed to be completely obvious, and most of them, they're just not, right? You need a lot of all the stuff we're just talking about now, right? Repetitions, time, and it's more than just that. You have to be able to think about it through somebody else's eyes, right? And that's the key benefit that I'm talking about. Is that
we'll spend hours just discussing a mulligan, like, and seeing both sides of it, and spend hours on it. That's how we know. That's even at the start of this video, we only spent probably 10-15 minutes talking about the mulligan. That was a pretty short one for us, but that's because we've done this discussion about this particular deck. And we've done quite a lot of testing with a lot of different various Waterfire similar decks to this. So we have like a rough idea of how both sides are meant to go through it. So we've spent, quite a few hours on that discussion already, which is how we managed to get it down to a brief quotation, 10 to 15 minute discussion about just one mulligan. And we ended up being, one or two cards. And even then, we were still like, maybe there's still room to mulligan something else in a different way, and it's very we go into a fair bit of depth in these discussions.
And I still made a couple of, was it two play errors as well, 2 mistakes or suboptimal plays, I guess is the nice way to say these things.
Well, one was like not playing around a card that nobody plays outside of us. So it's like, I mean, technically, in the very technical sense, it was like a slight misplay, but a not super relevant one. That you like, not one that you're like likely to get punished for, but it's still one that you probably want to clean up. I can't even remember what the other one was now.
Oh, and I think I definitely missed. I missed an Angel's Egg proc, right? You spotted that out.
Yeah.
So 3 mistakes actually.
But that might be partially my fault, because I always do it with the life totals when we're testing.
I'm gonna have to do my own life totals from now on. It can't be. Well, joking a little bit, but there's a world where that you lose the game because of that one life for sure. So
in a game where you don't have judges watching, right? and that's like there's a good chance you just like miss it, and then it's just gone, and then all of a sudden you got Death's Door because you're on one less life than you were meant to be on. Certainly a possibility.
I don't miss them in real life just because I always use pen and paper, so I always sort of checking back and glancing in tabletop you just don't have the no pen and paper basically. Right, is that I guess
I think so.
We had a little bit of I don't know if rant is the word, but we talked about the Nimbus Djinn a little bit there. I think it's that is really the type of stuff that we are talking about in that 12. There's really 12 hours of stuff like that, pretty much, right?
Yeah, why cards are included, why some aren't. Like, a big glaring one is obviously Merlin that everybody plays and Sisters, and we have no time for those cards. They're just terrible in this deck.
Yep.
And if a card like Merlin is not good in this deck, it's going to be a while before it's good in any deck.
Nope, but it's...
But everyone in the community seems to...
It's played a lot still seems to be looking in the decks. I think that's something that, it's hard to say if there's... I'll try and put the first one out, and if there's any interest in it, we'll end up releasing all of it. So I'll release the first part of that podcast. So because we will talk about all of these cards, why they're in, why they're out, because there's so many differences in our deck.
It's also probably a little too raw to just dump the whole raw thing.
Yeah, I think so too.
That might come up with some issues.
Yeah, so... But I'll have a go. Like I said, I think I'll just try and edit the first section and can just see if it's... if there's any interest in it. Right. Is that it? Is that? Don't think there's much else to talk about.
There's probably one thing to mention between this deck and the deck that I won the last league with is it was one card different. We tried out Famine in this list. Was that it? Instead of the double.
So there's two changes. So it's -1 Cave In, -1 Disenchant, +1 Power Flight, +1 Black Plague, whatever it is.
Yeah, Black Plague. That's it. We went up to 4 Power Flights. Okay. Yeah. I couldn't remember, but yeah. So pretty close.
I'll definitely cover that in the introduction to the podcast, though. But yeah, that's it. So it's a very near identical deck list, but a little bit of a change. So it's very similar to the deck that you won the league championship with.
Yep.
So yeah. But it has it's many questions. Let us know. We'll try and answer them.
I didn't play this league either, which is
well, you never played anything online. You don't love playing online. The only thing you ever played online was the league championship, right?
Yeah, that's the one thing I played.
That's it. So you only played one thing online ever, and you were bottom seed for straight knockout. Won 9 rounds in a row and won it, and then you retired.
7 rounds.
Sorry, 7 rounds in a row. I
and it was
sorry,
playing against the highest seed basically in the whole bracket every single round, and I cruised all the way through.
Pretty funny. It is. There's every chance that you'll be the only person that ever lived that will have only ever played one sorcery tournament online and it be an annual championship, and you won it with 100% record.
I might play the next one, win that one. We'll see where we go.
Well, yeah,
annual, right?
We'll see. But it's it's a bit of an odd one in a way, but from many in many ways. But I'm not surprised. I was like, you should play, man. Like, you should play. Yeah, like, I know you don't really have the... I know, there's sort of reasons that you don't like playing it, but online so much. But
I think the biggest reason is just scheduling the matches is frustrating between all the different time zones and all those sort of things, and just getting it to line up and then having to make sure you're there for it instead of sleeping or doing something else. It's just scheduling is, I think, the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm always happy to do the rounds, so to speak, because you can just do them ad hoc whenever you want. But then I really hate the knockout games. I think mainly because we're in Australia and it always ends up really awkward to arrange them.
Yeah.
Just for me in particular, just because of I have pretty limited time windows that I can play. So when I can just it's fine when I can just choose to play whenever I want, but when I have to arrange it with an opponent, it becomes pretty awkward pretty quickly. But luckily this year there was some stuff that helped a bit with that. Like Easter, for example, was smack bang in the middle of it, which helped a bit. Yeah. So there was a couple of bits there that helped a bit, but
I think the main reason why I played the last one is because I really wanted that playmat.
Yeah, okay,
I was like, I'll play here. I'll work out the scheduling to get this playmat.
Yeah, willing to put in the yards to get the playmat. So
yeah, if the reward's worth the effort, let's go for it, Pat.
All right.
Yeah, it's hard to get that every time.
3 hours. 3 hours for our commentary.
For a 49-minute
game, or 50-minute game, or whatever it is. So.
I think it started about 10 minutes in, right? So it was like 40-minute
game. So, yeah. But that's what you get, basically, if you listen to us, because we can talk about this game forever, pretty much.
And you didn't even get all the rabbit holes. Like we go on tangents whenever we're talking with each other. I know there'll be times when Nick's like, all right, go to bed. And then 4 hours later, I'm like, get off Discord. You're meant to be asleep. And we wouldn't have played any more games. We'll still just be talking about that last game we played.
Yeah, but we put a lot of effort into this deck, so it's really good to... I don't know what the future of the Archimago holds and whether they'll do anything that they want.
But most people just want it banned. The interesting thing is, in all of our testing, Archimago isn't even that much of a favorite, like win rate wise. Like pretty much every deck we run into it is fairly close to even, if not slightly favored into it. It's just we really enjoy playing this style of deck, and it's very good against everything it can play against. So, whereas the other decks might be really good into AM in particular, but might have very weak matchups into other things. So, whereas this is just more generally strong.
Well, I think so. And another big part that is just very difficult to convey is just that our Archimago deck is somehow being piled into the standard Archimago deck, and they're totally different, basically. And
yeah, true.
The standard one is
there's also a lot of cards that we play in our other decks that really help with Archmage matchups that nobody else seems to be playing, just in the meta in general. Not going to say what they are. There are cards out there that people aren't like trying that are very good into AM, and if they played them, there's a good chance nobody would be screaming for it to be banned all the time.
Yeah,
and there's cards to fight it.
And it's not, and it's not like one card or something, right? It's an actual list of cards.
No, it's more of a package. Like, to be fair, but that package, it's not like it's bad against other decks either. It's still good into the rest of the meta. It's just people haven't really tested it out or clicked onto it yet. Not sure why. Maybe they're just not exploring the whole card pool, but as it is, I think the answers are there. And it's not like it turns it into a heavily favored matchup, like all of a sudden you're 80% against Archmage, which I don't think any matchup should be more than like 55-60%. That's where it starts getting into very overpowered territory and should be banned, but the card pool is big enough that no deck is at that point. There's enough counterplay, which I think is another reason why it's a bit awkward that there's no sideboarding, because I think if there was, a lot of people would find these cards and actually not be as concerned about the issues at hand. So there's potentially other ways to get around dealing with Archmage that aren't just, let's just ban it. Let's just make Divine Healing unique. Let's just ban it outright. All those sort of things. There's potential format changes. Maybe you have a 10-card sideboard where you can sideboard once you see someone's avatar, things like that. Even if you want to keep it at a best of one, there's definitely workarounds that could be.
But they're not.
Tested.
I'm pretty sure they won't go that path. But even then, it's just
to me that seems like a better option than just outright banning Archmage.
Well, they're not going to ban. Somebody everybody can choose to do whatever they want to do for their local tournaments. But even then, just from a pure win rate perspective, there's plenty of other avatars that are similar in win rate or better even. Like in the online league, Avatar of Air had a way better win rate. If you exclude my matches or our Archimago deck from the league results, and you just only count the more standard Archimago builds, that had a very similar win rate to like Pathfinder, I think, Enchantress.
Yeah, it was sub 50, right?
No, it was like 56, 57%, something like that.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah, and then I think it was about 57-ish, and then, I think with my results it was closer to 60. So yeah, there's a bracket of, but then the Avatar of Air is like 65 or something, from memory.
Yeah.
So, which is like really a lot higher. So, and Avatar of Air is always really high. But I think, there's a lot of weird stuff just conceptually, I think, in the meta. Just because of all the crazy, all the fire charge stuff has really made things a bit wonky in the meta, and
not looking forward to what the meta looks like if AM goes away. What fire starts coming to people.
I mean, everything's just that's part of it.
Or even if AM stays and Divine Healing goes away, that problem still becomes just as relevant.
I think part of the reason is just that like a lot of people don't like control decks generally, like all control decks, and the only control deck that's kind of viable at the moment is Archimago, because all the rest of them have just been fire charged out of the meta, basically.
Yeah, or like bullied out of the control mirror by Archmage, like, because it's pretty good in the mirror as well, like just against other control decks.
Our one, you mean?
It has such a good toolbox.
Yeah, sure. I just mean, like, if there was, like, half as many or a third as many Archimago decks, because there was a whole bunch of, like, Death Speaker decks out there, and, like, Enchantress was still played a lot, and bloody blah, right? There was a bunch of other control decks. Like, people wouldn't like playing against those either, but the hate would be spread out, right?
Yeah.
The hate would be spread out between many different things, but because, basically, Death Speaker just doesn't really stand a chance against all that fire charge stuff.
It certainly makes life hard.
It basically, that fire charge stuff has just deleted every other control deck out of the meta, and the only thing that's left is Archimago, and the only reason that it's left is Divine Healing, basically. So it's but then on the flip side, it's like, I think part of the reason why like there's a bit of stuff that is viable is because it can overcome, like, it can do a lot of damage in one turn as well. Like Flamecaller, for example, I think has a place in the meta because it's pretty reasonable all round. But
there's even that new deck we were tinkering with that could actually be quite good, but that's secret tech.
But yeah, it's, I don't know. We don't really. I guess the main thing to illustrate here is just opponent could have won this game. We could go through a review of all of my top 32 matches. There was only one that
that'd be a long video.
Yeah. Well, separate videos, right? There was one game, and ironically, it was Archimago Mirror that, not ironically, but we know how strong our deck is into that. That one was just an easy win, but all of the other ones were, very much in the balance.
Yeah, I think it's because we've made our deck where it's that fine balance of trying to take out removal spells of our deck for more card draw, which makes the matchups where you just jamming into creatures a little bit, razor thin margins, but makes the control matchups, like in other Archmages, just an absolute landslide, which is, what we specifically designed this deck for.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's definitely worth it.
Yeah, that's why those matchups.
Ironically, our Archimago deck was predominantly designed to be an Archimago killer.
Yes.
Basically. First and foremost, because it was designed for a tournament in Australia, and Australia has a very specific meta with like roots being effectively banned, and also we know that it's a deck that there's a few sort of players that we know are the best players in the country, and they're the ones we're mostly thinking about what they'll play, and we had a feeling that, that Archimago would be like one of the primary decks that would be played by the best players in the country as well. So we were very much thinking, setting out to build an Archimago killer, which sort of seems a little bit weird that the Archimago killer is Archimago, but you just, again, Archimago is not, it's kind of an archetype, but it's kind of not, right? It's just an avatar at the end of the day that has an ability.
Yeah.
And there are different archetypes just of Archimago deck. Like our Archimago deck plays very differently to all of the other ones. And then even the other ones, they're not all the same, right? There are, some of them have significant differences. Like there's a variant that has water with replication.
Very aggressive AM decks out there with like heavy burn and things like that as well that just don't see that much play, but could be quite strong with a bit of tinkering.
So they're different, just in much the same way that not all sorcerer decks are the same, right? They do different things.
Exactly. And just strong avatars that have like a flexible enough like card pool that they can be built in many different ways.
So it's not. I say like it's really weird that Archimago killer is Archimago, but it's not. We're talking about the archetype of the deck, right? Rather than the.
Yeah.
So we'll wish. Yeah. Right. We finished. Feels like we never finished, but are we finished? Are we finished for the 40-minute review of the?
You mean the 3-hour review of the 40-minute game?
Yeah, that one. Is that one finished? Is there something you need to add?
No, I think that's everything.
Alrighty. Thank you. Thanks for joining me and doing it. It's interesting. I think if I had done it by myself, it would have been way less interesting and way shorter.
Way quicker.
I'm pretty sure I would have done it quicker. So
I have a feeling, yeah.
But I think it might have been closer to an hour, maybe less. But
you might have had to speed up certain sections instead of pausing.
Yeah, exactly. But also, it's. I think there was a lot of. I think it's more interesting. I think there's value there. I think, you pointed out a couple of things that, in particular, to like my, like that at the start where I should have did the draws are the other way around.
Yep, the turn 2, 3 draws. Yeah.
There was one other. What was the other mistake? There was one other mistake.
The holding the egg.
And holding the egg, yeah. So there was 2 things I wouldn't have pointed out either of those, I don't think, because I wouldn't have realised them.
I think potentially you wouldn't have gone into as much detail on the discussion of the turn 3 site placement as well, because that was quite a long one that we went down a fair bit of a rabbit hole, like discussing every point as to why it matters and like what all the options are and why even just not playing on the other side is a good option, things like that. Maybe you would have glossed over those a little bit quicker.
I think I would have.
Massive amount of depth like we did.
Yeah, and it's really important because it's like we're saying, it's just they were the key decision points.
Yeah, the game is basically won over those 2
and
turns.
that Valley of Delight placement. Those 2 placements were just massive. And it's really hard. Like we talk about it. It's hopefully we've conveyed enough information to sort of bring that to reality. Because in reality, a big percentage of games are won or lost in these types of things, in these placements,
and
right?
I know that there was won or lost at that point as well. Because a lot of people, a lot of people don't really go back and work out what happened in those early turns. They think like, oh, if I had a minion here, or if I played this certain spell differently, or if I tapped Drew instead of just drawing for my turn. Those few things, they're the sort of things that generally most people think about. Not like, oh, I played one site in one spot slightly different and I lost the whole game because of it.
Yeah, especially when it's like turn 3, right?
Exactly. Especially if it's like, it's not glaringly obvious, right? Like it is if you get snowballed in like in some other games or whatever. Whereas this one, it still ended up being a very long game, right? Like it's probably, it's at the earliest it could be is turn 11 because you tap Drew 3 times and you have 8 sites in play when the game ended. So minimum 12 turns, and it was decided like 9 turns ago, effectively. Unless there's like mistakes made down the line, like, you know, you can make that mistake early, and it's okay because they made a mistake further down the line. They let you perhaps rectify it. But if you make that mistake early and they play perfect for the rest, it's a good chance that costs you the game, sort of thing. And it's not really instinctual to pick up versus like, oh, I couldn't deal with this X thing, sort of thing, and just got smashed.
And just to reiterate, this is the type of, like, we've only got to the point to recognize this stuff just because of just the sheer amount of, like, we're talking thousands of hours here of literally talking about these things.
I know, for me personally, the site stuff was the thing that took me longest to learn, because it's not something that really, you can't really carry over from other games, like the understanding of it. It doesn't really, no other game that I've played really helped with that at all. So this was like, without the massive amount of hours and the discussion, like, I think the discussions that we spend, even more so than the massive amount of hours just on working on it all the time, is what really accelerated us into not only just identifying the problem, but like really working on it and trying to solve it as much as we can. And there's still stuff for us to learn that I'm sure we don't know, that we just, you know, we'll get there by, you know, playing other decks that do certain other site placements that we're like, oh, this would have been actually good to know back way when we did X, sort of thing. So
yeah, but it's why this game, it's why we play it. Like, this is part of why we play the game, right? Just the insane depth.
The incredible depth is why I really get drawn to this game, because I gave up on card games quite a while ago with like just constantly getting mana screwed in Magic and losing like Pro Tours and stuff from that, and that was very frustrating and made me rage quit quite hard, and still think about it now, and that was like almost a decade ago, sort of thing. Whereas this is just, I don't know, the massive amount of depth is just, I find very interesting. Even though it's like not even a big card pool yet, it's still so much depth and so much interactions to learn just from the way the base game just functions. It's only going to grow in depth as, you know, it gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really, I don't know, we get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and we get a lot of enjoyment through all these types of things that we're talking about, and trying to, I don't know, it's like solve the puzzle in a way, right? Like trying to just work out how this deck can beat this deck, and we don't really get too hung up on like obviously we like some cards more than other cards, and we have preferences and this type of thing, but we're very interested in just trying to solve any puzzle to do with this game, right? Like any matchup we would happily talk about, happily analyze, even if they're not really decks that we necessarily sort of suit our personal playstyle or something like that. But we don't get too, don't get too hung up on trying to tell something like suggest cards that should be banned or something like that. I don't know. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, we don't care. This is the thing. Like we're sort of talking like we do care, but the main thing that we care about, honestly, is just that whatever the rules are in regards to what cards are banned or not banned or how things are going to work, they're just, for any given tournament or whatever, they're just announced well in advance so that everybody's aware of them and that you can prepare for them and that those rules don't change. Because we just spend a lot of time preparing, right? And we'll prepare. We don't care what the rules are. We'll prepare them for whatever they are. So,
absolutely.
But we do like Archimago, but we also like other avatars, basically.
Yeah, there's plenty of good ones.
But there's just wider concerns about.
You know, I've been one of the really fringe ones. You know, like I guess fringe is my niche outside of Archimago. Like, you know, it made Geomancer go from completely unplayable to potentially one of the best decks there was in beta, and I'm tinkering with some Elementalist considerations at the moment, and there's some really fun things you can do with that, and no one really seems to think that's an avatar that's playable. So I think there's maybe if it goes away, that's even going to be even more fun for us. But
yeah, I think maybe so. I mean, I'm sure we'll like the
we'll do whatever we can with card pool.
We'll build a new deck regardless. Like
we'll get another deck banned. Don't you worry. It won't be the first one. Won't be the last.
But Yeah, I do quite. Yeah, I think just this deck in particular, just because we put so much into it, like I'm very, it's like a lot of all of these concepts that we've been talking about. I'm almost can like think about them in a lot of it in real time now. Do you know what I mean? Like I can really, I feel like I can really zone in and I can play like we said, even made a couple mistakes this game, but I'm like. I play other decks, and I'm sure those types of small mistakes. You're making many every game, basically, right? Whereas with this deck, I feel like it's limited to somewhere between 0 and 2 or 3, the small things that you did suboptimally per game, generally. So, and then I also just had there's a couple of other matches that we could potentially review on this finals run. One in particular, which was absolutely bonkers, where I was put to death's door on like turn 4 or something. So. And I still managed to win.
Yeah, I would actually be kind of interested in even just watching that game at some point. It sounded like a fun one. Haven't actually seen it yet, but from what you were telling me, it did seem pretty fun.
So, and I'm sure we could have a lot to say about that one. So, but yeah.
I just find it kind of interesting that even just from like the decks that we don't actually play, we probably have like hundreds of hours into just specific decks and archetypes that like. Don't even exist yet. Like in the meta in general, they were just waiting to come out, and we just haven't played them because we just play this instead. So that could be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. Yeah, just that we have in a way, because even when Arthurian Legends came out, right, like we had so many decks that were like so good in the old format, right? The 40-20 or whatever with just the beta.
Yeah,
just so many like top tier, super strong decks that just. Had never been touched. Like there were not even any deck lists similar on the Curiosa website type of thing. There was unexplored territory still. So I think there's always just like you're saying, even with the small card pool, there's so many possibilities that exist with this game. I think I've got to go to bed. So
yeah,
I think it's time. I think it's time to wrap it up. So,
yeah,
all right.
Let's do it.
All right, it was a pleasure, and thanks for joining on this one.
You're welcome.
And I'll see you.
Bye, everybody.
I'll see you soon enough, I'm sure. All righty.
Bye.
Later.
Yeah.